We're good? Okay. A few minutes after 5, so we're going to go ahead and call this Santa Clara City Council work meeting to order. Appreciate everybody who's here. I'm Mayor Rick Rosenberg. We have present from the council, Councilman Jarrett Wake, Councilman Denny Drake, Councilwoman Krista Hinton, and Councilwoman Lena Mathis. We'll excuse Councilman Shakespeare from the meeting. I'd like to begin the meeting with general citizen public comment. Has anyone come to address anything tonight to the City Council? Step forth and you can be heard. Seeing none, we'll go on to item 3, the working agenda. I've been requested by the police, and they carry guns, to move them up. So we'll address item 3A3 first, Council, with your permission, and turn the time over to Chief Flowers.
Thank you, Council. I appreciate it very much. That was a personal request from me. I got some elderly parents. I've got to get someplace a little later tonight. I don't want to be late. My goal here tonight, we're going to be really quick. We won't be too long. But as you know, next month we have a combined meeting with the city of Ivins. And we wanted to bring things that are specific to Santa Clara. Just get you warmed up to the ideas and things that we're contemplating. I'm already working on the budget, and we have every year we sit down and we kind of define what we're going to be trying to accomplish next year. We have a lot of things coming at us, and some of it is mandates, and some of it is just things that we want to do. We're calling our approach to this year charting the course. Basically, I'm not going to go through and read all those things that you've got over there. I just want you to know that we have them. We have some really strong goals, some really strong strategies, and part of my reason here tonight is to present those to you. And if you have any recommendations, like to see any changes, and we've got a couple of things to do. We're going to talk about the department, and we're going to talk about some stats that we've been asked about. We've actually got some graphs that Captain Rogers is going to present that to you, and Lieutenant Studley is going to spend a minute or two with you, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. If we go to the next. Okay. So on those strategies, we talk about standards, we talk about trying to get community support support of our councils, and we don't want to tell you this is what we're doing. We work for you, we want to hear from you about what you want to see. And basically, one of the things I'm really concerned with, of course, as we all are, is morale inside our department. So I'm going to turn this over to Captain Rogers, and he's going to talk a little bit about crime stats here specific to Santa Clara and how we measure up with everyone. So,
okay, so these two crime stats are just specific towards property crimes and crimes against people. And as you can see, those are increasing. We've kind of determined that they're more population driven. We've seen quite an increase in our areas, and so those are increasing. Last year it went up 16%, property crimes, and crimes against persons 17%. I don't know if you guys watch the news. That's kind of a trend that's going on even in St. George. Kind of the crimes against persons is just moving up, and we're trying to figure out exactly why, but a lot of that's population driven. Next is just kind of the total calls. When it comes down to it, Santa Clara is basically 40% of our calls, and that has been since 2013. Every year we've gone back and reviewed that. 40% of the calls come from Santa Clara, and about 60% of them come from Ivins. It's been a little bit increase. It's been like a 0.5% increase in Santa Clara versus Ivins, but statistically, I mean, they've been that way. And we've also determined, especially this year, that 5%, because I believe that Santa Clara is about 45% of the population that we take care of. That 5% that we're not seeing calls are generally animal control calls, and because the animal shelter is in Ivins, a lot of those calls are generated there, and then you get the walk-ins. frauds, bid inspections, fix-it tickets, things like that make up. So it's really about the population is kind of what drives those calls. The next is just kind of the PIM map idea of Santa Clara. This is where all the calls are coming from. There isn't a single hotspot in Santa Clara. They are all just calls coming from everywhere. It's not geographic specific, so we can't say, hey, we need to spend more time in this one little spot because it's a hot spot. It's not. It's everywhere. We get them all over throughout the entire city. So that is mine. Any questions?
Looking at those statistics, you saw 2023 had on call volume was up roughly 1,000 calls. Significant increase over previous year over year. What would you say is was the driving force for a roughly 1,000 additional calls this last fiscal year?
It could be just the way that we made some changes on the way we're reporting certain calls and things like that. But it's also we've had an increase since 2020. We've had an increase of population and people moving in, and so that drives it too. Every city's seeing a larger increase. You've got the increase in the assaults and also the property crimes are going up. So it's just really calls are generated from population. The bigger you get, the more calls you get, and it's just a wide range of calls. We've just seen a significant increase in property crimes and crimes against persons. That's kind of got us trying to figure those out.
So just follow up. So, because we've had the continued growth for years. I mean, our growth has stayed pretty consistent. But you mentioned also that how you're accounting for calls and you're doing that. What are some of the things you've done differently in accounting for calls that would inside that 1,000 increase, which is, like you say, more than the other years? What are the things you're doing differently in accounting for calls?
We're making sure that we're tracking our fix-it tickets. We're tracking our anytime we're doing special events. We're tracking our extra patrols, things like that typically haven't been tracked in the past, and so those contribute to it.
Okay.
Let me help you with that. That's a great question, Brock. As we're looking at those, what we discovered, what I really measure is where we're spending our time, and what we're finding that we weren't tracking our time the way that I want to track it. I know in our last couple of chiefs meeting, other agencies, we've been talking about a couple of years about what we should be tracking. We were doing so many things that we were not tracking, like for instance, when we get an extra patrol, we just go. We don't take a case number for that. And I think that's not good for us, and it's not good for you. We need to know where our taxpayers going, where our tax dollars are going, where we spend our time. So one of the things I looked at is, where are we spending our time? It's not just the calls. One of the things that we're becoming more concerned of is our crimes against persons. Our victims advocate is just so busy. We're seeing domestic, we're seeing assaults on each other, we're seeing fights amongst our kids. And it has gone up proportional with the population, but I don't necessarily think you have to accept that. For instance, in our parks, you've got to be more time in our parks. In our last meeting, we're trying to decide what's an acceptable amount of time for officers to spend their time writing the reports. I know the fire chief fights with the same thing. What we're discovering, and we started looking a couple of years ago, our officers are spending almost 45% of their time on calls and writing reports. That means only half their time we can spend in proactive enforcement. And what is proactive enforcement? It's just not patrolling around willy-nilly. We actually do focus things, our traffic, our high-density places, like our vacation areas in the summertime. We spend a lot of time there going around. We want people to know that we're there. We're spending a lot of time doing traffic enforcement, and we'll talk about those. Our traffic enforcement is way up, but what was really interesting, when we took both cities, I think we only wrote like 20 more citations in the city of Ivins. Do you have that number?
So that's a good way for us to determine where our officers are spending their time, is if we can see where they're making their traffic stops, 9. There was 9 more citations written in Ivans than there was in Santa Clara. So that shows our guys are working both cities.
One of the things from the time that we've combined our two cities that I've been acutely aware of is where our officers spend their time. I know one of the things I know Mary, you and I talked about, and Brock and I talked about that when we moved to the offices to the city of Ivans. What does that mean? It didn't mean anything. Our officers are out on the road. We have a few more people come into the office, but the Santa Clara assistants come here, we come here. And a lot of our officers, write the reports right upstairs. So one of the things that one of my goals is when I come back up here to talk about that is, what do you want us measuring? And I'm looking for answers tonight, but things to think about. I think we need to measure everything we do. Not when we take phone calls, but things that take our time. We used to not, like, for instance, a VIN inspection. It sounds like a little thing. It's when people are changing the registrations on the cars. They want us to come down and verify the VIN number. That takes travel time. It takes about 15 minutes to get the VIN number. We have to run a criminal history. We have to sign the form. The question is, should we track that? Absolutely. We should be tracking that. We need to know where we're spending our time. Part of what we look at also is when we look at obligated time, for instance, how much time do we spend here? How much time do we spend there walking apart? Should we take time for that? Well, of course, that's what we're doing. So it's obligated versus unobligated time. So my goal is to keep us in that 30% range. It's creeping up on us. But as you're looking up, one of the reasons why we look at this, the calls like this, and we sent you the map is, so we look at where our DUIs are, where we're writing the citations, where are the crimes coming, where are the burglaries, they're all over. There's not one place, Councilman, remember Mathis, you asked me this question about a year ago, where does high density mean more crime? Not necessarily. There's a lot of environmental things that go into that. But the idea is we wanted you to see what it looks like. We want you to be confident that we're doing everything we can do to be proactive on these issues. But I've got some concerns that I'll bring forward here in just a few minutes, but I'll have Lieutenant Studley come up and talk some of the things that we've done.
Thank you.
Hello. So based on those numbers, those graphs, those things that you see, we wanted to show you where we were at compared to other agencies in Washington County. So if you look at this chart here, I believe we brought this same chart last year in a work meeting to you. And then you can see where the populations, SCIPD would be us, Santa Clara and Ivans, and then you have Hurricane City, Washington City, and St. George City, respectively. Populations, the officers that they have working in that jurisdiction, and then we broke it down to calls per officer in each city. So you can see that number 352. So out of the year, our officers will take 352 calls of service per year. To where Hurricane City will be taking 111.8, Washington City 266.3, and then St. George PD 237.9. So we talked a little bit about this last time, as well as we will this time, that our officer per citizen ratio, we would like to be higher. We're striving for 1.5, but it would be nice to get to 1.1. Right now we're sitting at 0.88 per 1,000, and again, that's per 1,000 citizens, that's how many officers are available to them. So Hurricane City is at 1.73 per 1,000. The Utah average is 1.7. You can see Washington City is 1.16 per 1,000, and then St. George PD at 1.4. So then we turn that into what is the call ratio of our officers taking calls versus those other jurisdictions taking calls. And then obviously you don't have SCIPD because that's 1-to-1. But for every one call we take, for every one call Hurricane City takes, our officers are taking 3.1. In Washington City, for every call that they take, we take 1.3, and then St. George PD, you can see for every one call that they take, we take 1.4.
May I ask a question on that?
Good.
Just talking about dispatch. When you're talking about calls, you're not talking about calls coming in from dispatch, you're talking about calls coming into our particular precincts, right?
these are calls that come in through the Washington County Dispatch Center
It only is,
to
okay.
Santa Clara and Ivan City.
And then they divide them,
On
okay.
anything inside of our jurisdiction that requires an officer response. So when we look at our past trends, it allows us to build strategies, and as we build those strategies, we come up with goals, and these are some of the accomplishments that we've been able to achieve based on the goals that we've been able to set. So we look at accreditation. We were able to get accredited in October of 2021. That was done through the Utah Chiefs of Police Association. And we work tirelessly to make sure that we maintain that accreditation cycle. And that's just ever evolving standards. And we're abiding by those best practices set forth by the accreditation board, not only in Utah, but nationally. And for training, we hold a very high regard of training, whether it be police officers doing post-training, whether they be anything necessarily that helps better the officer. We hold a high regard. Training, we believe that it makes the officers a lot more well-rounded. It's better for the community, so we have a high focus. We want to ensure that we get more than the 40 hours that is afforded to us from post. Education, again, high focus on education. Fun fact, we have 6 master's degrees working inside your police department, 2 associate degrees, and then I think we have 4 that are working on bachelor's. So we hold a high emphasis on education. We want to make sure that you guys get the best bang for your buck in the people that you hire, and we believe that it produces critical thinkers, so we want to make sure that you guys are awesome out there. So big focus on education. Our response times right now, we're sitting around 6.5 minutes for the average response time. Anything that's under 10 minutes, we think that that's pretty awesome. We are seeing those times increase as our volume of calls are increasing, so that's something to look at. With accountability, we're required with our accreditation that there's a huge accountability piece, and it's not only for officers, it includes the chief as well, and it requires us to document and to ensure that any misconduct or officer complaints that they go through Utah Post, and that those are recognized and those documented. And then we've had a huge decrease in the officer complaints that we've had since we've been accredited, and we again want to attribute that to our training and through this process. And then our supervisors, we seek out extraordinary individuals. I think you guys know that. We have Sergeant Hallman and Sergeant Tober that are patrol sergeants. All of us are de-escalation trained through a program called Force Science. We hold a lot of credibility through that program. And as you know, there's been a lot of emphasis on de-escalation and mental health, and so we've all made sure that those supervisors are all trained to that standard so that we can do the best that we can for our subordinates. And then lastly, but not least, Gang and Drug Task Force, we've put now Detective Pondoyle into the Washington County Major Crimes Unit. That helps to give us a global perspective on crimes being committed in our cities. It also gives us a network to help with, because we all know that the bad guys don't just do crime in Santa Clara Islands or in Washington or Hurricane. So there's access to like King County, Iron County, Mojave County, Washington County, all of those major counties. We have a regional perspective on crime with adding an officer to that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chief Flowers.
Our mission statement, I just want to know we have one, and when we were talking about our training, we're really quite proud of the higher education of our department. I don't think the department does better than what we do. One of the things that we're looking for in the future, we've got to stay on this training and education thing. I think you can see what's going on in the nation. We just have to. The accreditation is extremely, extremely important to us, and we've really, I think, built a robust accountability into the department. A part of being here tonight is part of our accreditation requirement. We're required to come in. We do anyway. A lot of agencies don't do what we're doing, but when Lieutenant Studley talked about complaints, we don't really get complaints on officers, but we get complaints on the processes. So we've been working really hard on those. So this is where I want to kind of end. One of my goals is to get to that 1.5. That's going to require us to hire 2 to 3 officers. Right now, our detective, as you know, we've had some really high-profile cases the last couple of years, and our detective carries about 30 cases. Most agencies carry between 12 and 15. So I'm actually in the process of moving one of our officers into the detectives. That comes when we require officers, as you know, Brock knows this very well, comes with vehicles. The training's going to go up, and so our strategy is to address all those in the next year. And the way that works is we sit down once a month and we talk about, okay, this is our strategy, what have we done last month to accomplish that? And then I'm going to report those back to Brock. I think you've noticed that our monthly reports have a lot more detail in them. That came out of a couple of requests from the council, so we feel very, very good about that. These are recommendations, you have them in writing. Any recommendations you have, we're going to be meeting over the next month and a half to put some meat on those. But kind of what we're looking at. We feel very good where we're at. I feel where we're at. I know that, again, I say this, but when I come to the councils, I generally ask for what I need, and I'm pretty clear on what I want. But and I've talked to the city of Ivans about this. I've talked a little bit to Brock. We need to get a couple of officers. We just have to. We're starting to see mission creep on us. It's like law enforcement is kind of a weird thing. When we really start measuring what we're doing, it's like warming the water. And pretty soon, if we don't keep up, we're behind. And public safety is not something that I feel that we can get behind on. We need to lower our obligated time. What happens when your time goes up, we're not able to give the time to the citizens that they want. I will report back to you. I mean, our victims advocate is busy every day. Every day we've got victims coming in looking for resources, and I'm so glad we did that a number of years ago. So that's sort of our report. I want you to, I just want you to know that we're going to be coming to you, but I want to give you the kind of department you want. We've talked a lot about the need of a couple vehicles every year. We're probably going to need 3 next year. I am going to ask for some officers, but that comes to good. So, like, it's a tired old story. I know. We were talking about wages. It never goes away. I mean, every year it's a challenge to meet the needs of our employees and to keep them from. I know all departments do the same thing. We're fighting with other cities because we have great people that work here and they like working here. But we've got to take care of them to get them to stay. So I feel good about our crime stats. They are going up accordingly with our population, and we're looking at some resources. And this is just to warm me up for the justification that we're going to be doing in the next few months. So hope it was educational. I want you to feel good about where we're at as a department. Thank you for, I don't mean to bring this to you during the holidays, but I've got a month to get ready for our next meeting, and I just don't want any surprises. I want you to be surprised. Anything you want us to come back with you with some detail on, I'll come prepared. And I do have a wonderful staff. So that's pretty much it.
Questions for Chief while he's here?
I have one. Are you finding that you're having occasion to use the new county receiving center?
I'm going to have to turn that over to Lieutenant Studley. Are we using that? I think that we are. We've been out there.
We've been introduced to it. I believe we've used it one time. It is still new, and so it's new to us, to the process. We know that it's there. We have their staff come and introduce themselves, and I think they brought us a cake, which was really cool. We understand its role and its function, but yeah, we've only used it one time since it opened.
Okay.
Once we get warmed up to it, I can see the real value in using
Right.
it a lot.
Yes.
So I think it's a wonderful thing to have, by the way. I'm a big proponent. We need to do something about these folks. We just can't book everybody in jail. You just can't do it. We're finding that out more and more. And so one of our rises, what we're starting to see, is a lot more mental health issues. We take a lot more of our time because you just can't take them to the correctional business facility. It's not fair to just dump everything on Washington County. And we're looking for more resources. I had a friend of mine that was the psychiatrist running down there at the hospital, and he was telling me, because I was kind of getting on him about, and we bring him down here, and he goes, listen, we're just a crisis place. We don't provide the mental health long-term. We're just trying to get people in a better place for 24 hours. Once I understood their role, I thought it was something a little bit different. So we're lacking there a great deal. But, that's a great, I love it. And we're going to use it more as we get educated to it. It took us a while to get used to the Children's Justice Center too, but once we got there, it was a great partnership.
Thank you.
Just a comment. Again, I'm leaving the city council this next year, but I want you to know how much we appreciate in Santa Clara, those officers and the training. To me, they're much more congenial, I would say, than officers in the other areas. They're willing to work with you and talk to you. They're not afraid to explain their position, and I think that helps a whole lot for the citizens to understand why and what they're doing. And to me, you ought to all be recommended and commended.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. We have the saying, just because you're small doesn't mean you can't be sophisticated. We've handled some really, really tough things lately, and they've done marvelously well. We're pretty excited. Just last closing, I got a letter 2 days ago from the emergency room, and we had a very, very, very difficult case. We sent the officer down there, and the victim really didn't want to talk to the police, so he stayed in the background, he didn't get offended by it. He says, I'm here just to gather up the evidence. This victim doesn't need to see me. And the hospital staff was very impressed with that, because they said that's not normally the response. We tell law enforcement they can't speak to the victim. Victims sometimes don't want to talk to us. That's okay, don't take it personally. It's about them, not about us. But it was a wonderful letter to receive from the nurses and the doctor there. Should be sharing that with the officer as soon as I see him. So, but thank you, Damien. We're gonna miss you too. Kind of.
Thanks.
Kind of. So, all right, I'm gonna sit down and go do my stuff.
Thank you, guys.
Maybe if I can add one thing, working with Chief, had some discussions with, and I know in staff-wise, our Justice Court is going back to in-person court in January, which is facilitating us the need of a bailiff, which I've had some discussions with Chief, and just staff-wise that we're looking for somebody. So we've had some discussions. He sent some numbers over that maybe we can help each other out in getting another officer for them, but it would be dedicated as our bailiff as well on those days that we have court, but they could get another. So he sent some numbers over we're looking at to make sure it works for the last 6 months of this fiscal year, but kind of helps out.
Yeah.
Filling kind of two needs for the cities, so.
Thank you, Brock, for bringing that up, because my goal is not only to fulfill the court need, but I also was going to use that position to help us with our detective need. We have to do something. We're drowning down there. And so, but thank you. I forgot about that. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, let's go back to item 3A1, fire fees discussion. Chief?
All right, Mayor and Council, good evening. So I wanted a couple items for you tonight, but the first item, the fire fees considerations. So in the last meeting that we had, the joint meeting, it was my thought to go back through kind of all of our agreements and see how we can contribute to the cost of our fire and EMS services and putting back into the general fund. We found some areas that are of interest, and that's kind of what we're presenting to you guys tonight. My goal is to bring it back for adoption, hopefully first half of next year. But the fees, in general, we don't have any assessed fees. It's pretty common practice nationally, and then even here in our county, to assess fees. Fire prevention, EMS, obviously transport, we assess fees for that as well. But there's some areas that we're missing, quite a few areas. The fee schedule I'll show you folks tonight, it's pretty exhaustive, and I'm looking for your guys' feedback on this work meeting to kind of, if we want to tailor that back or where we want to go with those fees. And then I'll kind of go over how we're going to collect those fees, who pays for them, and so on. So we go to the next slide. So I put a small presentation together just to kind of work through the general principles of how the fees work. But we're looking at going with Fire Recovery USA. They're a third-party vendor we would contract with. It's a national vendor, but just like EMS billing, they'll handle our fire mitigation fee billing, so that's prevention. And then they collect a percentage, which is in the contract here. So we'll look at that. But the first goal with working with them is to pass the city ordinance. So we've updated some city code, which Matt's going to be looking at as well. That's in here too. We'll review that as well. Once we get the ordinance passed, the code updated language, then we adopt the fee schedule, of course, and off we go. But there's no upfront cost with this Fire Recovery USA. Personnel, what they'll do is collect information from the scene. So when we get a rollover, like on the 91, we don't collect anything for that other than if we transport by state regulation, we assess the patient's in medical insurance and we recoup costs for that. But as you know, with discussions with the county, it kind of didn't materialize. There was a House bill that was passed in 2021. I called up to Logan City and talked to one of their state representatives up there, and the state Utah code was passed that actually allows us to, and we're going to review that in the code in the city ordinance. It allows us to bill for some costs we haven't been billing for. But folks will collect stuff on scene using an iPad. They'll usually get a license plate number, and then it's a couple first and last name of the patient, maybe a phone number, and then this Fire Recovery USA company will harvest our data from our EMS fire reporting system. And that's kind of part of the agreement. We have to allow them access to that. And then they'll process, usually through the insurance. So if it's a motor vehicle accident, then they'll go through the motor vehicle carrier's insurance. If there's a fire, let's say out in like Mataqua, then it would go through the home insurance carrier. And then at last case, it could go to the property owner area having jurisdiction, which might be the county, it might be the BIA, it might be the BLM, and they're going to follow up with them. So they'll get an invoice from this Fire Recovery USA. iPad inspection currently, like all of our fire prevention, as you guys know, Con's he's busy over in Black Desert, but a lot of fees we don't, plan review, inspections. He just goes out there and spends, I think Brock had asked him maybe 20 hours a week doing that just for free. We don't assess any fees, and that's pretty standard like Washington City. We can review those. I have Washington City's fire fee, Hurricane Valley's fire fee schedule, and then others throughout the state. If you guys want to, as we get to the fee schedule, we can compare those. And then, like I said, automated billing. That's huge for us. Even when we get to the next item, talking about our EMS contract, is what time are we spending processing our billing. So like if we went and did this in Polaris, I would do it. They would give me the report, I would look in there, I would generate an invoice, and then we would submit it. Or if we can use these third-party vendors, yeah, they collect a percentage, it's just more efficient for us. And I'll get into how that affects really the ambulance medical billing. And they're about 70% collection rate. I think it was we could send a document up to 90% on hazardous materials. So this is their assessment with our approximate call volume, kind of out to the county. These MVAs is motor vehicle accident, vehicle fires, are kind of self-explanatory. But about a $56,000 increase in revenues. And again, it would be a cost share. That's what they projected this fire. This is just for mitigation, which we don't do. So we have, the fee schedule is pretty exhaustive, but we do have fire prevention. So it's all the fire prevention stuff. We have mitigation, which most people, at least in Southern Utah, don't charge for. So that's going to be that rollover accident, and then we use the jaws of life. We're actually going to charge a fee for that. If we land a helicopter, they charge a fee for that. So that's the mitigation. That's specifically that number there. It's not going to include fire prevention. I've seen upwards in the $100,000 range for certain agencies, larger agencies that are doing their fire prevention programs. I mean, the revenue can go up dramatically, but that's just for mitigation. Any questions on mitigation, kind of what that is? Okay. Go on to the next. So Brigham City, that's a combo of, yeah, there it is, prevention and mitigation. That Washington figure is a little bit of their wildland, is in there as well. In South Davis Metro, they're about 42,000. So that'll be up to obviously Brock and David to analyze, come up with, if we adopt the fee schedule for mitigation, what next budget year's revenues are going to be. So I'll go to the next. And that's just kind of a projection with the numbers that I received. So I think it's on your right, I imagine, the revenues forecast. So that 330,000 is what we have budgeted this year for revenues. In 22, we did about 303,000. We're projecting, hopefully, if this vendor that we want to switch to comes through, up to 550,000 based on our current transport volume, which is about 750 patients annually. So that's a huge jump. Wildland, that'll be up for you folks and new council members to decide what we want to do with that program next year, but our revenues was 329,000. We had 0 budgeted revenues, and we know there's an expense, about 250,000 of that on personnel costs, equipment. That varies on what type of assignment we do. That's not up for discussion tonight as far as the fees goes, but I included that if we generate revenue. I think Hurricane Valley did 375,000, obviously a larger organization. They have their I believe they have 2 crews, but they work on a 40-hour work week. As you guys know, we use our full-time staff to respond, so. And then that mitigation about 50,000, so that'd be maybe, 550,000, 570,000 increase in potential revenues. So, and I scaled those back took off 10% from what the vendor projected, just because they're in sales, I imagine. So we'll move down, and we'll go over how they calculated there in the next presentation, but we can move through that. That's basically, we'll go up for me, if you don't mind, right there. In that language, we want to look at the middle one. So the forecast is highly dependent on the client providing adequate billing data. That's where we use that iPad, and then at that first bullet point, they're talking about a 50% lower expectation in the first year rollout, because we got to get the system in place. We got to, again, which is true, like the police folks were talking, we got to train people to actually collect this data. So at 1 a.m. when there's a rollover on the 91, and the goal is to get the patient off scene. They all leave. It's like, hey, did you get a license plate? That's kind of an afterthought. So that'll take some training, and then hopefully we can progress with that. We can scroll on down. And this is we can stop here. If we can capture all paragraphs, the 3 there. Perfect. So that's the iPad inspection, the automated billing process. We'll do self-inspection, so like our businesses and occupancies, they can do a self-inspection. There's a portal that they can access online. And then there's a fee that goes with that we recover if it's approved in the fee schedule. And then, again, this is the company we went with. That was through discussion with other departments, chiefs throughout the state, selecting this particular vendor. That's the same thing we did again in the next discussion, trying to find the right vendor, right? Who's going to do this and manage this for us. So I'm happy with what they presented, the Fire Recovery USA. And that documents, we can kind of scroll through it. Kind of what they do, that's that percentage of collection, 90% on NDAs with hazardous materials. So that's like a motor vehicle accident, and they'll say there's like a hazardous materials, like an oil spill. We'll recover a fee for that. And even the supplies that we're using, we don't get cost recovery for like absorbent, and obviously our time and wear and tear on the rig. That's all calculated into this. So let's scroll down, please. Keep moving through that document. So again, I kind of talked about this here on just the process on how it's going to work. I think I was pretty clear on it, but we'll go out to the scene, iPad, the captain, the company officer will gather the information. It'll go into ours is called ESO, but that's our software for reporting that we use in the county. They'll harvest the data through that, and their team will follow up with submitting invoice collections and so on and so forth. And our agreements spell out how we're to go about those collections. And we can look at that. That's in here as well, of course. We'll scroll through this. Keep moving down. And then we'll stop here. So here's our fee schedule. They all have the presentation right on the screens in front of them. Okay. Yeah, if you're able to scroll, I'm not sure how it works, but if you're able to scroll, it's a good list here. So the first one on top, we're already doing some of these things. So standby and unincorporated response fees. The unincorporated, meaning that's language for going into the county or the state area. We're gonna charge for our time, so that's wear and tear on our vehicles. Again, the standbys we're already doing because we have so many events here in southern Utah. Hurricanes revenues way up too because they have so many sponsored events out there. They're in unincorporated areas like the Red Bull Rampage, marathons, and on. So we are billing for certain events based on our state requirements, certain populations. But we've included just kind of everything that, so like, let's say myself and Con, when we have the duty on a Sunday, we might respond out to a rollover on the 91. Well, for my response, we'll charge $337 an hour. For the engine that goes out there, it has 2 firefighters, that's second line, it's $583 an hour. So the way we came up with those are looking at our partner agencies and seeing what they charge, of course, in their fee schedule. But when it comes to mitigation, that Fire Recovery USA, they've done an analysis like on what the standard rate for maintenance is going to be, and then our personnel costs. That's when you get into fire prevention, what's CON's hourly rate or overtime rate, and those are factored in there. And there's language in these documents that'll talk and describe exactly. If anybody had a question, public, they could have this language to review and see how do we come to those numbers. So they're not arbitrary, but they're difficult to discuss. They're kind of all over the map. Like if we talk about like a site plan fee, Hurricane might be up at like $250 an hour, then Washington's down at $100. But a lot of organizations like Logan and Hurricane as well are adopting new resolutions for fee change, basically fee increase. So we went kind of in the middle ground with what we've selected. So again, that standby fees. When we have an event, we'll have like the paramedic UTV, $190 an hour. So again, that's already being assessed manually. Like Debbie will create an invoice for like True Grit, we'll say, and then we'll just bill that organization. Or Greater Zion, when we have the marathon, we would bill them ourselves. Well, this company's going to take care of all that. So that's it. We do have, which is another discussion for staff reports, but fire investigator coming on board. That's in the process of becoming post-certified, where she'll carry a firearm. So her investigation prospects, working with another the state investigator here in the county, which is the only one for arson. So my point is, she could go out to Hurricane or other places, and then we'll basically assess that insurance for that fire. Whoever, like if it's a property that was caught fire, structure fire, we would assess the homeowner's insurance at $300 an hour. So we can scroll down when we get a moment. Any questions on? Just stop me if you have questions on those. Can we go up to those mitigation? Can we go up?
Back up.
Yes, sir. Yeah, right there. So these ones are interesting. I was working with Logan and then North Tooele, I think I got it right, regarding these mitigation rates. And so they scale them level 1, level 2, response level 3. And this is from Fire Recovery USA, the vendor who's going to be billing. But those actually have changed since previous year, so I did increase those. That's on your guys' document. So they increased based on consumer price index, like 3% each year is what they say. So maybe we could come back every few years and re-adopt that the fees increase, or every 5 years. We'd have to figure that out. But whatever we do adopt is what they're going to obviously bill. They're going to take this sheet and then put it into their database. So I guess we can scroll down here. So again, those mitigation fees right there, they're quite a bit per incident. We're not recovering any costs from that, right? It's just we go out there, we have to pay our employees, the time we spend, the drawdown, which is them running calls in 45 minutes out in the county and not taking calls here in the city. We're not recouping any costs, wear and tear on the rigs and those things. That's how they come to those agreements. Let's go up just one more, if you don't, right there, that block language. So that's the state code for our ambulance billing. So remember that's separate, so if you get an ambulance, in an ambulance and you get transported, those rates are set by the state, and that's that language, which is in, anybody that's doing ambulance transport's fee schedule, it's that language. So that'll change based on how the state adopts whatever the ambulance transport rate is gonna be. And then we'll move down to this EMS super bill. So this we currently do not have, so the mitigation we don't have, the super bill we don't have, which is all of our supplies. We'll need to have those fees adopted for our new EMS billing agency. They're gonna wanna basically see what we're gonna charge for disposables and medications we use. And then they'll draft electronically these into the bill, basically the ambulance bill. Like the gentleman said, they recover about 25% of supplies used. So if we give a certain medication or do bandaging, most insurances don't pay that. Only about 25% of them will pay this. So there are costs of the supply, and then there's a markup of, I believe it's 50% on these items here. So we can scroll down through all these, and you gotta list each one, otherwise you can't charge for it. So that's why we're doing this. And this is pretty standard. Logan's done this, Hurricane. It's pretty standard throughout the state. So we'll move down to right there. We'll stop. There was depending on if we go with in item 2, our new bill processing vendor for ambulance collection, there'll be a convenience fee potential. So the language in there, that'll probably change just for your awareness. It says convenient payment fee. That'll be a percentage is kind of what we talked about, $2, and I talked with Debbie and Ryan is our EMS director today, but just going with the percentage, because that can go up and down. You can have a $2,000 bill and you only get $2 or whatever. So we'll throw in a percentage rate in there, and I know Brock had input on that, but that's the only change that we base from the document you see before you. So public education fees, we're doing a lot of this. We're just not necessarily charging for it. Some of it we do. These are like all the AHA CPR classes. Folks come in, we pay people overtime to come and teach these. So these will help collect for not only the class costs from AHA, which is set by them, and it'll allow us to collect for our personnel time. So that's where you look at our budget and you look at some of the overtime costs to pay a full-time person that's doing something outside of their regular duties on shift. They're getting paid overtime. So that's the issue. If we're not collecting fees, that's the whole intent of this, is trying to recoup costs, right? So, okay, any questions on where we're at so far on this? Okay, fire prevention fee schedule. So again, we don't currently collect for anything with Con's time that he puts in, but this false alarm's pretty standard, the first alarm. So this typically will be, like let's say a school, it'll be a multiple response. We don't necessarily, we can kind of scale what we want to charge to them. So that's why that's $50, because obviously kids and juveniles can get involved with that. But typically this fire alarm response fee schedule, it's going to be for businesses that know they have malfunctioning alarm system, and the person that owns the building is out of state or whatever, and they don't address it. So if folks are getting called out, 5 times in a week, then you go to this fee schedule. So again, it'll be automated through our system. We'll go down through the general fire prevention. Not sure if you want to get into every item of this, but it's technical, and Con does put a lot of time towards this. So plan review, acceptance testing, that's for like new systems. Con will go out and make sure that it's operational. Fire sprinkler plan review, and for the future as he gets certified, because right now we go out to W3C for a lot of stuff. If we can do it in-house, we can start assessing those fees for those builders. So fire alarms, these are all plan reviews, commercial hood systems, fire hydrants acceptance testing, LPG, which we got 14,000 gallons of, I think it's propane up at Black Desert that they're using right now, just portable to heat their building so their drywall stuff will dry. So that's like, hey, would we ever have this? We know gas stations will, but you never know. So we just wanted to be exhaustive again in this list. We can move through. There's hazardous materials. Those are annual permit fees. Again, Con and I, we've worked with other departments and just tried to really vet this out to be fair with the fees and kind of pick a middle ground between the other, what the other agencies are charging. So go up on there. Explosives and blasting permits, we don't charge anything for that. That's usually obviously out in the lava. That's going on all the time. That takes Con probably an hour and a half to meet with the person doing the blasting. Sit down, give them the paperwork, they fill out the paperwork, they send it back, and then obviously get a permit without a fee on that. So, and then these are all the permitting fees, annual permits. And they mostly relate to hazardous materials. We can scroll down. So, like an aviation facility, oh, we'll never have that, but you never know. So I might put a landing pad at, and again, we'll get with Ivans. I've talked with Dell regarding adopting this as well up there, but they might put a landing helicopter pad somewhere. So we want to put that in there. We can go on down through, those are more like outdoor displays, fireworks displays, canopies, and hot work operations. Again, he's constantly dealing with that. It's good too, I think, this is just my opinion, but if we have these in place, all of these fees, like hot work, they have to come through a process to get a permit, let's just say, right? And so that kind of helps, I think, streamline a lot of the process, as opposed to meeting contractors at restaurants and, hey, can you get over here and do this? And he's great to do that. But I think if we can go through an official process, this fee schedule really, I think, solidifies that as well. And it might give some control on all the stuff that he does, the time spent. So, okay, so I think that's the end of the fee schedule. Now we get into, this is fire recoveries agreement. And again, Matt's gonna look through this, and then if we do bring it back to you, we'll make sure it's all I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So, but pretty standard language. We can scroll. There's their fee percentage, the collection. It should be on Article A or Appendix A. Just gonna get the page here. Schedule A. Yep, going down.
Exhibit A, is that what he's talking about? Exhibit A. Oh. Yeah.
There we go. So companies agree to bill responsible party on the client's behalf for services provided, rendered during motor vehicle incidents and other emergencies. The mitigation rates listed in Exhibit A, which are on that yellow fee schedule by 7.1% annually based on the annual price index. So they'll increase those rates. And then they'll also charge 4% there, so that processing charge, they'll charge 4%. And then they'll do an assessment based on the net that they collect. Again, they're about 78% is what they're telling us they collect on what we charge them. What we charge whoever the insurance is, they collect about 78%. So it's much higher than our ambulance collection process. So, but I think that's about it. The other documents in here, this mitigation rates it goes over each one and how they come to those charges. If you scroll down, this Exhibit A, all of these are in that fee schedule. So if we have questions on how and what they're charging, it's all right in here. So, and that comes directly from that vendor. So I think that's it we'll go to the code language, unless you have any questions on what we saw so far. It should be down towards the end of the document.
Chief, do they collect on the wildland revenues?
Say it one more time.
The wildland revenues, are they excluded from this agreement?
So the wildland agreement, so if we go on a wildfire, we will charge through this fee schedule.
But the
Completely.
collection, the collection agency's not going after it if it's governmental entity, right?
If we're on a state response mission, so if we're on a state fire that the state takes over, then we'll go to the state for that.
Okay.
Yeah, so two separate entities. So this would be like a fire out in Matako or something of that nature, and it's not a state. We put it out pretty rapidly. Doesn't involve until like a you know, the overhead charge that they have, and they bring in their big team. Doesn't involve that. It's just we take care of it in an hour. We're going to charge for an hour, yeah, for the rig and the mileage. So here's the code language. In 15.2010, we adopted last year was the fire code. I just threw that in there. I would like to change that to the current edition of the International Fire Code. So when I bring back the adoption of city code, and if possible in January, I'd like to change that. And we'll just, because they just recently adopted the 2021 fire. As you know, probably 10 months ago, we did the 2018 fire code. Well, they just adopted the 2021. Probably March or April. We kind of knew this would happen, but I think this might be better language just to capture. We don't have to come back each year. I think that's appropriate. 15.2060. This is obviously currently in our city ordinance, but I'd like to change the language to fire prevention processes requiring permit fees. So the building inspector and the fire marshal shall act as a committee to determine and specify any new materials, processes, or occupancies which shall require permit fees in addition to those now enumerated by the fire code. By resolution, and Matt's gonna look over this to make sure we're getting it all right, but by resolution, the city of Santa Clara adopted the Santa Clara Evans Fire Rescue Prevention Fee Schedule. If that's to take place, that language will be in there. Copy of the fee schedule can be available, so that's that update. That's specifically for fire prevention. And then for our ambulance standby fees, this is a new language in 2.28.140. That's where a lot of the language is for the fire department. So it'll be a new item, but collection of fees, costs, expenses, and other charges for fire, emergency rescue, EMS, and other similar services rendered by the city. A, finding of fact that Santa Clara Evans Fire Rescue Fire standby fees and ambulance billing rates are set, again, at per Utah Administrative Rule R42682, as authorized by the Utah Section 268A 403, and that's for ambulance transport. So we currently don't have that adopted, but that's the code that allows us to build the rates we do for ambulance transport. The supplies and the time we spend for standby, that's going to be not under that code. So that it'll be adopted by Santa Clara Evans Fire Rescue Super Bill, which is the document that we have currently that has all that list of supplies, which is now in the new fee schedule. So we've been charging for that, but we haven't had it adopted in our official city language. So that's what that is. It's that list of EMS supplies, and then again, we might bring those back if cost of supplies go up. And then the average billing rates levels typical for incident response established by Fire Recovery USA. So that's that language, that Exhibit A that you saw that explains what they're charging for and how. That's that language for that vendor. And then the International Fire Code, there's language in there that says what we can assess for. Doesn't give you the amount for your fire prevention fees, but it says you can assess. Municipalities are granted in the fire code to do that. So that's typical language. And then this last section here, it's a little bit lengthy. It came right out of that state code, but it's 1148-103. And that's from that House Bill 303 that was adopted. That was 2021. This is the code that came out at municipalities and counties shall ensure an adequate level of 911 ambulance services are provided or contract to provide 911 ambulance services to 1, provide 911 ambulance service to any proximate county, municipal corporation, emergency medical service, special service district, private corporation, nonprofit corporation, state agency, or federal agency. So again, this language here is right out of the state code, and we'll have Matt massage this to where we want it, but it basically states if that's your dirt that you're responsible for, because EMS is now an essential service in Utah as of 2021, they have the obligation to provide that service. If they don't, they can contract. We don't have a contract with the county or anybody else for that matter. We just have to go out and do it because that's what our state mandate is based on our license. So that'll allow us, give us a little bit of teeth to, if so deemed, we want to bill the county or any other agencies directly through fire recovery. For most cases, we're going to try to again go to that insurance. That's where they have success, the automobile insurance of the occupant or the driver. But at worst case, we can fall back on this. And then 2, receive 911 ambulance service for any continuous county, municipal corporation, emergency medical service special district, private corporation, nonprofit corporation, state agency, or federal agency. And then 3, jointly provide. So they have these options. 911 ambulance service with any contiguous county, municipal corporation, emergency medical, special service district, private corporation, nonprofit corporation, state agency, or federal. Or 4, contribute toward the support of 911 ambulance service in any contiguous county, municipal corporation, emergency medical, special service district, private corporation, nonprofit, state, federal agency, in return for 911 ambulance services. So, and then B, the Santa Clara Fire Rescue General standby fee, ambulance billing rates, fee policy is hereby found to be true and correct and is hereby adopted by the City Council and made a part hereof of all purposes of finding in fact. C, collections, fees, costs, expenses, and other similar charges incurred by the city, rendering fire, emergency rescue, and other similar services shall be subject to collection by the city. D, parties subject to collection, all persons or entities having received the services, and all persons or entities responsible for payment of services shall be subject to collection by the city. Method of collection, so this is going to include the Fire Recovery USA vendor that I'm electing to go with. So E, method of collections, the city shall undertake collections against any person or entity receiving or responsible for the services or shall contract for the collection with a third party as adopted by the City Council. So that'll be in, when we bring it back, obviously it'll be more concise for the adoption, but we're electing to go with Fire Recovery USA, and their preliminary draft agreements will be in the package for you guys.
Have they already
That's all I have.
They already disclosed to you what if we try and collect and it goes to the third-party collections, what percentage they take?
No. So we're at a standstill. They will not, the next step is to adopt the fee schedule through city process, which here we are. And then that process begins on
Negotiating.
what we get to see. But I've seen like the app and processes, but know that there's hundreds of departments that are using it nationally, up and throughout the state. I actually got that information from the chief at North Tooele district. So they cover 1,500 square miles up there. So they're real similar to what we're doing, having to go way out in these unincorporated areas. So he turned me on to these folks, and I've talked with the Logan folks as well. So there's all east to west coast they're using them. So seems like a likely choice. So, but yeah, we'll need to look at that, see what their fees are, of course.
So I've got a question. So I actually went through something similar to this recently where we had a sprinkler head break in my business. And of course that set off the fire alarm, fire department shows up, has the drill locks. I get there before they actually get done. We go and we turn off the water, of course it floods, part of my business. At what point would I get a bill from the fire department for that? Because I had the thought in that moment, like, what is this costing me to have them come in and basically turn off the water and then hang around for a while and make sure things are correct. It was already a crazy, stressful time, and then, you call the disaster cleanup, and that's $60,000, and then the insurance doesn't want to pay the whole amount, so there's like threats of lawsuits, and because right here, basically on D, you have that whoever got that service is going to pay it eventually. And is that really the goal, or is it just to get insurance to cover it?
It's to get insurance. I think if you look in detail at that fee schedule, you'll see mitigation is specifically for like automotive related, mainly for the 91 is why we have it, this unincorporated. If you had a motor vehicle accident here in town, we would submit it to the insurance company, but it's not going to go direct to the individual. That's not the intent of and what we're doing, it's to bill those responsible in unincorporated areas insurance. So in your particular case, there's no fee really that we would assess. So the fire alarm, it's an abuse policy. Like if you have an alarm, that we talked about that for repeat offenders. And I've had this in my previous experiences. Is a business owner lives out of state or something. It's like, man, this is the 5th time in a week. It's putting a drawdown on our services for the citizens that pay taxes. So, but that's the intent is, and then homeowners insurance and those things, they submit it to them directly. So we're not going to go. It's not intended for any individual. You'll still get, if you do get assessed by EMS, which is today, you're going to get a fee. That's going to be assessed. You'll get a charge for that and for transport. But other than that, that's the intent. So
Okay.
routine services is not the intent. The whole purpose of this, which is probably good in the description in the fee schedule description in the front. You kind of had language in there to address the issues with funding, especially when it's not fair to raise property taxes. How can we strategically look at innovative ways to recoup costs so we don't have to pass it over to the taxpayers? And that's the same thing I like talking with the chiefs up north. In Hurricane as well, Hurricane Valley, they have their big long fee schedule as well coming through. It's trying to look at innovative ways to pick up those costs. So, but it's relatively new, like going to the insurance companies. I was years and years past, somebody said that would be like a genius way to recoup costs if we could actually, fire departments could bill insurance, and now here we are. So, and it's pretty much a national standard, through this company. So, but that's the goal. Go to insurances, and then property owners, when the city deems we want to go that route. So, i.e. the county, they'll get an invoice, and then there's language here to recoup that cost. So, based on our city code. So, that's it.
Any other questions, council? Have you made this presentation to Ivans yet, Chief?
No, I haven't. I just casually discussed with Dale what the plans are. But that would definitely need to be, I think that would be a responsible thing to do, so that, because we're going to probably do a rev share on a lot of this stuff. So
Before you bring it back, you'll go take it, you'll talk about it with the Ivans Council before it comes back here.
If there's time to. We have it slated to come back on January 10th, our first regular meeting. But Matt and I have talked about this as that we would send over to Dell, as he's had some discussions with Dell, and just to let them know this is what we're looking at doing. And so they're aware of it, of what we're trying to do. It's not something that I believe they need to have an adoption of this and the fee schedule and everything, as we're the entity that's providing the service. But it is something we want them to be aware of, that they know what's going to be happening. And as Chief said, it's a lot of it's all about cost recovery, that we're providing services and expending costs that we're not recovering. And so hopefully that, I said, will help in the longevity of the department in trying to support itself.
Yeah, I think in consideration to that point too, agreement that we have with the state for wildland, it's your signatures on it, not necessarily Ivans, City of Santa Clara. So, but they get the cost share of it, the benefit. But that agreement is solely through the city of Santa Clara. So, not sure if that would be nice to get them on both, of course, codes and such. But
Just make sure that they're aware of it.
Yeah, we'll reach out to Dell and make sure that he has this as what Chief has presented tonight, and so he's aware of where we're headed, and he can submit if he has any concerns, reservations from their side. So
yeah, I have like Hurricanes fee in Washington. If you so desire to see that, I'll send it to Brock, and then if you want to compare and contrast, you're welcome to obviously have that. More information, the better. So
I have one more question.
Mayor, just one quick question for the chief. Chief, you told me a few minutes ago that the hard copies you gave me are the most recent versions of everything. Are these the same as the ones you emailed me this afternoon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
the same.
Okay, good.
I just drafted my own language that it kind of helped me.
Yeah,
so
no,
you-
and
you
actually,
corrected.
yeah, and actually, you did really good. There's just a few little things that just I can add a little polish to, but
Great.
yeah, I think we can get them ready to go for the 10th. So,
Okay.
if that's the plan.
That is the plan.
Krista?
So I just had a question about the recovery of the fees. If the intent is to recover those from the insurance company, but you have an underinsured or an uninsured, will this company then look to the property owner for that recovery, or can we kind of tailor how we want to collect and what we
We-
want to collect?
Yeah, we can tailor, talking with the vendor, it can be at, like, let's say, the fire chief's discretion, because we do that with ambulance building. We have state language that says you will pay $2,000 for an ambulance transport. Well, then the insurance gets involved. They cut their 75% of the cost of what they're willing to pay off of that, right? It's deducted so much, and then, oh my gosh, it goes to collections. Well, now, from that $2,000, we received $175. And they'll actually call me on my cell phone, patients, and ask how I can work with them on that. So that's ultimately going to be, the end be it all will be that there's discretion, so.
But according to their contract, you can't negotiate after it's turned over to them, is that right?
Yeah, well, once it goes to them, and if it goes to collections or something, then I would be involved. That's usually where I jump in.
Once it hits the collection point? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Item 3A2, ambulance medical billing discussion. Chief, how long is this going to go?
Ow. 20 minutes.
Okay, then we're going to jump down to item number 6. Because Lena's going to get up and leave in 15. And I want to make sure that this happens before she gets up and leaves. But item number 3A6 is acknowledge the outgoing city council members, Lena Mathis and Danny Drake. We have parting gifts, I guess you call them. You put in enough time, you get a little sack.
Well, thank you.
But I just want to say, and give council the opportunity to speak as well, that it's been an honor to work closely with these individuals. Like I said at the Christmas party, they have gone above and beyond in their service to the city, in my opinion. They've been great to work with, and I really appreciate them both. They're close friends, and I hope they stay that way, so don't be a stranger, and don't be surprised if you see the mayor's mayor's number on your phone for some type of future assignment or request. But thank you. Wish we had a full house in the audience, but we don't. But thank you for all your service that you've given the community.
Thank you.
Well, I would like to thank you and the council for the opportunity of serving and enjoying this time. I mean, it was very enjoyable for me, and if I hadn't have reached a certain age that I wanted to move on, I would still pursue this, but there's things personally that are pressing, and but I think this has been a great opportunity to serve and watch and learn, and again, thanks to those that I've served with.
Speech.
I'll have to be brief because I won't make it through it if I talk too long. I just want to thank all of you and your staffs. I won't get through it at all. I've been so blessed to be able to work with you guys. You are the salt of the earth. And when I say I truly love each of you, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And that goes for all of you here too. Brock, Mayor, Chris, everyone. if you ever need a volunteer, I hope I'm #1 volunteer on your phone call, because I will be there with bells on with anything you need. And if I can ever help you, let me know. But I'm very grateful. Appreciate it. And I love you all.
We're gonna miss you both.
Staff, Delana, Denny, will miss you. I don't think we can pull much more history from Denny's brain that he does. I mean, I always am amazed when he pulls things out and says, back in 1982, we had this agreement, and your knowledge that you have there will be missed. You definitely have that institutional knowledge, and your willingness to come back and serve after having done this gig and come back again. Appreciate that. I don't know Denny's a friend for a long time, but Lena, again, we appreciate you and your willingness to serve in everything you've taken on. You, City Council, brought that back. Sammy Kloss, many things, and appreciative that you'll stick around and continue to keep those traditions alive in Santa Clara. So thank you, and like I say, staff is very appreciative of you guys and all you've done for us.
Thank you.
Okay,
Did we get to talk to you?
absolutely.
Well, I would just echo all those sentiments as well, but just thank you both for the incredible servants that you are to the city and to the citizens. And I just appreciate very much my association with you and all that I've learned from you. You're great examples, and you will definitely be missed. So thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah, I'll echo that, and I've been telling people there's pretty big shoes to fill. And I really do feel that way. You've both done an excellent job, and we definitely need to recognize Lena's work with the fair and that presentation. That's been a ton of work as well, and how well she's done with that. And then the LPC and working with the league, and there's going to be a lot of assignments that have to be doled out that she was doing so excellent at. So thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Okay. You can leave anytime you want.
All right.
Got that
I'm
on
good.
check.
I'm good for 10 more minutes.
That's right. Okay. All right, Chief. Sure, absolutely.
You can raise that for your support of the fire and EMS services, opening up a new station, and it's been a pleasure to meet you guys.
Thank you.
That's from all the fire folks.
Thank you. You'll make me cry again. Thank you.
That's nice. Very nice. Thank you, Chief. Okay, back to it. Item 3A2, ambulance medical billing discussion.
All right, so our current contract is with MedUSA. It expires the 28th of next month. So we're looking to go to Gold Cross Services. They're, as you guys know, the primary provider for transport for St. George and all throughout the state. But they also have Gold Cross Services, large corporation in Salt Lake. They also handle billing, and we'd like to go to them, and we'll go through the reasons why. Again, I tasked Ryan Moore, EMS director, to look at how can we increase our revenues, and I didn't necessarily think that billing was an option, but it looks like it might be. So one of the fee changes, they're charging 4.95 MedUSA, it'll go up to 5.5%. We can scroll into the presentation part. So there's kind of a comparative analysis. I talked to you about the agreement dates, and they're confident that we can get moving if we pass it on you folks pass it or approve the agreement on the 10th by the 29th. So we would transition to them. Their contract again ends on the 28th. We would give them written notice before then, and then off we go. So Gold Cross Services is going to be a 4-year agreement. The current one is a current agreement with MedUSA is 3. I talked about the fee they're going to be assessing on the net revenues, the collections, and then both of them have a 90-day basically wind down period, or they're going to continue to, in a limited capacity, MedUSA will continue to collect. So if there's any, that slop over period, they're going to be doing their job and still collecting. So, and Debbie has sat in multiple meetings with myself and Ryan and talked with these vendors and just to talk about fees and go through all the details of these contracts and what they can offer. So that's kind of a general overview. We'll go to the next. So the biggest item right now is the time that it takes for Ryan Moore. Again, he's on the floor. He's working that shift work with the 4896. So like recently, we had a delay in collections because he went on vacation. So we want him to go on vacation, but the current process that we have is all manual processing. So he has to actually call like Intermountain, get face sheets. It could be, if it's the weekend, it could, in a holiday, there could be a delay in them getting information back to him that he needs to manually code and process all of our billing. So point being, Gold Cross Services, which is a pretty standard method for collections now, they integrate to our EPCR, which is our computer that we do all of our medical charting on. They'll get into that system and harvest the information every 24 hours. Basically the system pushes it to Gold Cross Services. So no longer will we be doing a manual process, and that's why my understanding from Debbie, the original agreement with MedUSA was reduced rate because of that front-end work that we have to do. But again, Ryan's busy with that, and we pay him overtime to on a Saturday come and collect information with crews or handle issues with what the hospitals need. So that's the hope, is to get a timely submittal of our data to the billing agency so we can get to that collections right out of the chute. And that's my understanding. I talked to several people in the industry, but whoever can get into the system first with the information into insurances is going to have a higher collection rate. And there's some other things we'll talk about with how their software works. Their system checks on deductibles, if that's paid or not. So the current system, MedUSA, they're primarily they've been good partners, but there's a lot of work that occurs. I get phone calls, like I said, on my personal cell phone from patients, which shouldn't be happening. Ryan shouldn't have to do extra things that he's doing. We pay them a fee, or they collect a fee on a percentage, and they should handle it. So that's the intent. I think the electronic information transfer is going to be critical. So that's why the industry moved to EPCR data for a myriad of reasons, but it's also billing. So they'll also bill on that last bullet item for non-emergencies standby. So Ironman, PGA, those type of services, they'll handle that. Right now we draft our own invoices, like with, won't give the name, but a large public relations group within Southern Utah, we didn't get payment for 12 months. So that's where these folks have 40 full-time staff, Gold Cross Services, that constantly, based on presentation we were given, sit and deal with getting people on payment plans. They reach out. He said basically the squeaky wheel gets the grease is kind of how he describes their services. And I'll show you the number. Again, I'm looking at industry, what are folks moving to? Because big corporations like Unified Fire, they're not going to move to XYZ if they're not producing. So, and I'll show you the agencies in Utah alone that are under Gold Cross Services moved down. So those are all your organizations that are now using their services. Chief Decker from Hurricane, I met him at an event, and he mentioned that their revenues have gone up for ambulance billing. They're starting to do interfacility transports as well, but for that last quarter, it's gone up tremendously. So, and I showed you kind of the projections on that fee schedule, what I'm projecting. If we can go from 300 to 500 or 800,000, that's a big jump just for not changing what we do. And obviously that'll dramatically, or not dramatically, but it'll increase as we get more calls. So, pretty good list of folks here. I've talked to a few of them, chiefs and different EMS folks. high regard for their services. We can move down. They've been around for, I think it's 40 or 50 years in Utah, Gold Cross. So they have this. I could talk with Dale from Ivan's city managers, like they're in business still, and it's tough with Medicare and other payees that get their write-offs. They don't. It's a tough business to be in a private ambulance company, and they've survived and they do really well. According to their the presentation we had over just recently, it swinged more than 50% of their collections is now from those fire agencies. It's not actually Gold Cross as far as their business goes, their revenues. So that's interesting. But okay, so we'll go through this. They've given this projection. I did the one on the right with MedUSA, just using our payer data. So the payer mix obviously is a big deal because the VA is different than Medicare and so on. But in the column on the right is where we're at, at least that was 2022. About 750 transports. And again, this is just transports, not fees for assessment on scene, fee for getting a medication on scene, and then possibly the mitigation. So, but we collected 305,000, 892,000 in write-offs, and 1.2 was our gross billing with those rates that are set by the state. So they send invoices for 1.2 million and we get 305. And again, those write-offs are bad debt, and then what the insurance writes off to, like the VA. If the cost is $2,000 for a transport, they might pay 50% of that. Depends on the payer. But their projection from Gold Cross was 607. So, and that's at the same number of transports. And he said that, like the 1.239, that will go up January 11th. We're going to start, I've mentioned it in the past, but we'll have a paramedic. We've had 4 folks graduate paramedic school. So each station will have a paramedic on every day, and that's a higher rate that we charge, obviously, for that higher level of care. So he's projecting, based on those numbers, like a 1.8 gross. We'll see, because he's a salesman, right? But Debbie and I have reviewed this, and we've looked at the numbers, and we'll see how it all comes out, and then getting feedback from other fire chiefs that have gone to these folks at Park City and Hurricane. So everybody's pretty darn happy with them. But that's kind of the projections there. And again, I put in that just that brief chart in the previous presentation, 500,000 expected. Let's just say revenue, and Brock and Debbie will have to figure that out, what we want to do if we go to them for this. We might stay at 300, not too sure, but that's kind of an idea of what they're expecting. So we'll move to the next. And this just goes through, I'm not going to go through their summary. We can kind of scroll. This is about their business, how long they've been in business, their employees. Their collection rates are demonstrated. Right now we're at 25%.
My daughter only comes here irregularly, and she's coming through town tonight, so I'm going to dinner with her.
Good for you.
See you.
See you later.
Bye-bye. So yeah, 25% is what we're collecting right now on the gross, and they project they can do up to 40%. So we'll see. And this goes through, if you have time to review it or care to, it goes to how they get to those collection rates. So we can scroll down. I'll go in there. Again, the process is EPCR. It's called electronic, right? So that's a big deal, getting everything to electronic. The agreements that we have, we can kind of just scroll through their presentation. Here, we'll kind of go into this realm here, but we'll be able to get into their portal, which is really neat. Differs from the MedUSA, and actually see what they're billing for our calls that we have. And then there's a patient portal that they can access as well. And there's some discussion about how they offer electronic billing, credit cards, and they offer payment plans, which is not currently something that MedUSA, their primary focus is medical billing, not necessarily emergency ambulance transport billing. So they have a different focus, where this portal is something that I think that's a good thing, that a patient can get in and actually see what what data is going on with collections and when they were sent an invoice. Right now, they'll call again the office and we give them the contact with MedUSA. We can review their run report, but we don't have any data on when their invoice was sent to them, why it went to collections. We don't know any of that information. We'll scroll down, but this should help with that information that we need. So again, we can see what runs are in the queue. It's going to be, I think, good thing for Debbie as well, and Ryan obviously to have a better situational awareness of our collections. So we'll move down through this. That's the patient portal there. We'll get to go to that. We'll go right there. So I'll try to be brief and read through just mainly this middle paragraph here. This kind of talks, this memo is from Ryan, our EMS director. Currently in MedUSA, we're performing most of our front-end work. This has caused up to a 3-week delay in sending the information for MedUSA to perform the coding and billing. The front-end work consists of obtaining patient billing information and missing demographics from the hospital's network. After transport to the hospital, he says he must submit an email to the hospital network with patient's admission number, full name, date of birth, date of service, and incident number. The network takes up to 72 hours to provide this information once they have received the request. If the information is requested on a Friday, the information is typically released on Monday unless it's a holiday. Once obtained, each file needs to be attached to the corresponding patient care chart and missing information tied to the care chart. I requested MedUSA to take over this aspect, but was denied. MedUSA requires this information from us prior to moving forward. Getting the request out in a timely manner can also be delayed due to operational duties and calls for service. That's i.e. his vacation or if he's busy at the station. MedUSA is unable to collect the payment. The information is sent to another third-party collection company. This collection company, AMS, then requests additional information. When AMS requests this information, it's through different Gmail accounts and individuals. AMS has a high turnover rate in staffing and does not have a consistent contact person. And it goes on. So I just wanted to read that portion. It kind of gives from his perspective what he has to deal with currently. And if we can move that all over to a corporation that can handle this for us, they're not going to handle everything because it could still go to collections. The collection company we use is in town, but the vendors offered some other collection that's widely used by the other organizations. So we might go to that depending on what's good work with that, but that's kind of the gist. There's a lot of front and back end work that Ryan has to put in. So we're hoping to alleviate that through this organization. So we can keep going through here. I think we're about there. This is the current MedUSA agreement. We can scroll through that. Just gives the deadlines and terms. And then billing service agreement will bring us back if you guys so desire on the 10th for adoption on the 29th. In there it has the language on what they assess for fees, and it goes over their terms, and I kind of try to present that in that initial PowerPoint so we can just scroll through that. Matt's going to take a good look at that, make sure we're not missing anything before it comes to you guys. And then this business associate agreement is for the HIPAA violation, or not violation, HIPAA requirements, so that when we do go to electronic data exchange, we have something on file that says they're not going to violate the patient's HIPAA rights. So that's all that is, the business associate agreement. So I think that's it, right? We're there. Okay.
I like the paragraph after the one we read because Gold Cross Services removes the need for me or an agency designee to obtain the information from the hospitals. Once our patient's care chart is completed, anyway, it goes on to talk about the speed of recovery, and I know that that's a big issue with a lot of people. You get a bill immediately. If you get it a year later or 6 months later, the likelihood of getting it paid is considerably less. And so I think this is probably a pretty darn good move.
That's what we're recommending. There's one other vendor, but this is our solid recommendation. So.
Questions for Chief Parker, Council? Thank you, Chief. We'll see you again shortly. Item number 384, discussion regarding burial vaults. Ryan?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First of all, I just want to again thank everyone that attended, participated in, and helped behind the scenes last Saturday at Race Across America. We couldn't do it without all the help we get, so thank you for that. Oh, without further ado, so our current ordinance, 1224-110 burial vaults. We currently only allow concrete burial vaults. So I'm referring to just your conventional burial vault. With the cremations, we allow other materials. Robert Kenworthy Monuments called me a few weeks ago, and he wants to start providing a polyethylene burial vault. And I reached out to, I've talked in the past with representatives of St. George and Washington, and the only conclusion we can come up with why they have ordinance similar to ours that only allow concrete is because really that's all that's been available in our area that meets the standards, the straight standards. There have been some that have come before us, different types of fiberglass and plastic that just didn't meet up. But the polyethylene vaults have been around for decades. They're used all across the country. For example, Arlington Cemetery, that's all they use, polyethylene. And talks with him, he had already gone to St. George, taken these to them, and Washington, and they were both going to council, like I am, to amend their ordinance to allow for these. So there's a few reasons why he wants to provide these. One is cost. Just from the cost of materials and labor, if a family decides to go this route, it could save them several $100s in funeral costs. Another one is weight and mobility. So I don't know if you've ever watched the vault company before or after a funeral, but with the concrete vaults, they have to be able to back that truck right up to the grave. And it has to be square shot, can't be at an angle. We can dig from a 45, they can't lower it from 45, which usually requires moving several headstones to get the equipment in there. These ones, they brought some by for us to look at. Myself, Dave, and Ryan Hafen. 2 people can carry them very easily. They're not very heavy. And they also have lowering devices that a person can carry. So they don't even, if this is what they have, a lot of our cemeteries, for examples, our old dirt historic section, you've got some tight areas. They can just carry all this over there. They don't even have to drive the truck to the plot. Another reason one I like is when the lid is put on, it will have a rubber gasket on it, which will create an airtight and watertight seal, which concrete vaults do not. So he's hoping to start getting these in stock and providing them after the beginning of the year. Concrete vaults aren't going anywhere. This is just going to be an option. And so we are looking to just add, not change anything, just add to our ordinance. So right now it says, before a casket is accepted for burial, it must be housed within a concrete vault having a fixed top and side panel edge restraints, incorporating the construction and having a strength capable of uniformly withstanding a stress of 7 1/2 pounds per square inch. We're just looking to add or an equivalent lightweight burial container that meets industry strength standards. So if you guys don't have any concerns or suggestions, I'll bring it back on the 10th.
Why, do they make cremation vaults out of poly too?
They do poly, they do fiberglass, they do metal ones.
But is there a reason why you wouldn't add the same language to the cremated remains?
In the cremated, it already says a vault made of fiberglass, concrete, or metal with strength deemed adequate. So we could add polyethylene.
That's what I'm saying, is, add polyethylene there
Okay.
too.
I can do that.
If it's good enough for the other one, it should be good enough for that one.
Okay.
Questions, comments, council? Rob?
One thing I would look at if we're looking at this is, Ryan has expressed about in the old dirt section and the issues there with moving headstones and that. I think it would be a topic to discuss to say if in that old section, that this is all we allow in that old section to help preserve that section and not having to move as many headstones and those vehicles going in there, that just a thought that maybe that's all we will allow in there to help preserve that area. So,
And to add to that, whenever we have a burial in the dirt section, we have to call the ball company and let them know that's where it's gonna be, so make sure they bring a four-wheel drive truck. And even when they do that, there have been several times they get stuck and we have to pull them out the back. And that's, can be disturbing for a family sitting there, waiting for their loved one to be laid to rest. Having to bring a backhoe in to get the truck out.
I really like that idea. I bet the first lady would like that idea too.
I think the first lady's all over this idea.
Any other questions or comments?
And I don't know, there may be some point in the future, if these are watertight and better than the concrete, why don't you mandate them everywhere?
I wouldn't mind doing that.
Then you don't get you're still gonna get the tracking on the grass from the backhoe, especially when things are soft.
Yeah.
But you're not gonna have to bring in a heavy vault and
Well,
rub everything up. And
Like I said, we can dig from a 45, we can put the dump truck anywhere, and there's several times, we have to move headstones to get our equipment in there, but there's a lot of times we have to move additional ones so they can get a square shot to the block, so yeah, that'd be awesome.
Council?
I probably want some feedback from Kenworthy on what he thinks customers would think of that change. Is there some strong feeling that concrete is better for some people, or would it be fine if it was all this way?
The research I did, there's 2 or 3 different companies I just looked up just to get some reference. And they all claim the same things. Polyethylenes are 5 times stronger and 10 times lighter than the concrete. Once you put that lid on it, it just makes it so rigid and strong. And there's some pictures in here, scroll through. That's the vault itself. I think the next one is the lid, and the honeycomb ridges for rigidity. They have different models. That one there is more of a heavy duty, and that's kind of more aimed towards where you have double burials in other cemeteries. And they also offer some that are a little less expensive, that are a certain percentage of recycled materials. But talking to Robert, he's not sure if he's going to provide that or not, because he doesn't know if they're as tested as the pure polyethylene is.
Use the ash to mix.
Yeah, talking to him, and he hasn't, again, he wanted to go to all the cities because he knew the ordinances to make sure that this was doable before. But he's quite certain that, especially saving a few $100s, more people are going to opt towards this.
Well, we're not eliminating the concrete vault, we're just giving alternatives.
Yes.
The way it's written now, it would.
So to me, it's a good market-driven alternative. If they do it, and actually for us, as a city, it's probably better.
Yes. I agree.
Okay, any thoughts?
This might be a weird question. Would this save any space over the cement vaults?
No.
Okay.
Your plots are all 4x8. And they're really the concrete vaults, are most of them, unless it's an oversized one, are only 3 feet wide. It just gives you a little room for error when you're digging the one next to it.
Okay.
Some of us are getting wider though.
Or to accommodate previous error, probably more likely. That little gap. Okay, bring her back.
Okay, thank you.
Regulation, or 3A5, regulations for accessory structures, discussion, Jim.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll let Brock bring that up. We're back. We've had this discussion a few times. I really don't want to go too long tonight if we don't have to. So just giving you an update on this, we haven't had much discussion since September. This came to the council on September 13th. Prior to that, we had a discussion in June. We've also had 2 discussions with the Planning Commission, both in June and September as well. We had 5 areas where we were looking to make some changes to. The first was height regulations. Number 2 was double frontage lots. 3 was smaller accessory buildings. 4 was accessory buildings and accessory uses, general requirements. So that's a new section, because right now we don't have much in the code. And then modifying regulations, a few changes there. So we provided that working copy. And then we also have an exhibit that was presented by the Planning Commission, or Planning Commission Chair Logan Blake, on September 14, 2023 to the Planning Commission. And so we'll go through that as well. If we could go, here we go, the first section of language. RA, we had this discussion, if you recall last time, back and forth. And it seemed like we were good with an accessory structure height of 25 feet for this one, right out the gate with the larger lots. Vineyard comes to mind, so is Lugano subdivision, just allowing them to have an accessory structure at 25 feet because all the lots are half acre to an acre in size. The height regulations for the R16, we kind of went back and forth. So really, even though this is red, this is what the current ordinance says. Because previously I thought, why don't we take a step back and start at 15 feet and then do the 1 per 1 to get them to 20 feet. But in this zone, it was decided that, or our previous discussion, hey, we're already limiting the primary structure building height to 30 feet in this zone because it's smaller lots. And so I think we'd be okay with just the 20 feet here and letting them have that the way it is. We also have the accessory dwelling unit here at 20 feet. If we go to the R110 zone, this is where we have some changes. The R110 and the R110 mixed use. They're similar, mixed lot size, they're similar. We talk about the height of 35 feet to a primary structure, which is standard throughout the city. And then we talk about a detached accessory building shall be erected to a height greater than 20 feet, shall not unless additional rear yard and or side yard setbacks are provided. So for each 1 foot of additional building setback, 1 foot of height is allowed up to a maximum height of 25 feet. And then the next section says accessory buildings which comply with the setbacks required of the primary residence are allowed at 25 feet. So if they come in and they meet the same setback as the home, we've had some of those that have come in. If the front yard's 25 feet and the sides are 8 to 10 and the rear is 10 and they've got a big enough lot to put that next to the house and it meets the setbacks, then it can go at 25 feet. Now both of these sections, and I think I messed it up above in the RA, again, this is just a working draft. We put an accessory dwelling unit, ADU may not exceed a height of 25 feet. So when we wrote the ordinance for ADUs, when we put that in place about 1.5 years ago, or the updates we did to it, we did the IADU as per state code new. But the ADUs, we limited it to 20 feet. We did some research and saw a lot of communities had them limited to 20 feet. And some allowed it higher than 20, and some had even more constraints at 15 feet. But we feel that to allow for the ADU above a detached garage, you hear the term Ponzi flat, whatever you want to call it, we're okay with that 25 feet. And so if you scroll up briefly, Brock, that's meant to be here in the RA zone too. It says an accessory dwelling unit ADU may not exceed a height of 20 feet. That also would be changed to 25 feet. So 25 feet for the RA zone, the R110 zone, and the R110 mixed lot size, with it staying at 20 feet in the R16 because the lots are quite a bit small. If we scroll down to the next section of code, we have the double frontage lots, and I went and looked at this today, and this is a working copy. When I bring it back, I'll have the black and the red. This was just the copy I had available. I'll have a better copy so you can see the existing versus the proposed language. A lot of this is new language, but with the double frontage lots, item A there, right now the code talks about the 6-foot masonry wall constructed along all rear lot lines unless otherwise approved by the Planning Commission. The rest of the section says accessory buildings no higher than 15 feet in height, maybe 10 feet from the rear property line, and storage sheds no higher than 6 feet in height may be placed adjacent to the wall. At our last discussion with both the council and the Planning Commission, we felt we should take that out. It seemed a bit too restrictive. And then item W says where the Planning Commission has granted an exception to paragraph A, the minimum rear setback for all structures shall be 20 feet from the rear property line. Right now it's 25 feet. We talked about changing that to 20. That's still double the minimum setback in a lot of our residential zones of 10 feet. We felt that 20 feet worked. And so that's the change there.
Hey, Jim,
Yes.
give me an example of an exception to paragraph A.
An exception to paragraph A. Well, we did one recently in South Village at Black Desert, where they had 3 lots that were double fronted lots. And because of the change in grade or the topography, we felt that we should let the lava stay in place.
For that vertical separation.
Right, rather than making them dig it out and put in, you know, the park strip and sidewalk. But right now it's written they have to be at 25 feet for that rear setback. But we're saying, why not 20 if the front's 20 or the front's 25? It's still double the typical 10-foot setback in the PDR zone in the case of Black Desert. So that's a recent one. And so we would look at them case by case. This, you know, this is a starting point. We could add some more here. If we go to the next section, what Brock has up, 172120, that is a new startup. We don't address that right now, or that's a new section we're proposing. It states no building permit is required for accessory buildings of less than 200 square feet in size without utilities as per the International Building Code, provided that such a building will have no plumbing or electrical elements. Building height is limited to 10 feet with a minimum side and a rear yard of 3 feet if existing easements have been cleared by the building official or designee. We have just a little bit of repetitive language there that Cody and I were talking about. So where it says 200 square feet in the first sentence in size, we'd strike without utilities because we talk about as per the International Building Code, and then we get into plumbing and electrical elements. So it's just saying the same thing twice. Now 172150, we've had some discussions here. Right now, the only thing in the code is item 1, and we've made some changes to it. We've added these additional items to try to address key issues that we've dealt with or are dealing with. I want to make you aware, Cody is part of this discussion as well, so I may refer to him on some of the questions as they come up this evening. We've worked on this together. Item 1 says accessory buildings shall not be constructed upon a lot until a building permit has been issued for a primary building. No building which is accessory to a primary residence shall be erected to a height greater than 20 feet unless the requirements of all applicable city code sections, Title 17, which we were just discussing, are met, which may allow for additional building height. 2, accessory buildings, and we kind of spoke about this previously in that section, accessory buildings of less than 200 square feet may be built 3 feet from property line if existing easements have been cleared by the building official or designee. Building height is limited to 10 feet. When determining the fire separation for any non-accepted accessory building, an accessory building of less than 200 square feet on a neighboring property will be disregarded. 3, we talk about stormwater runoff for accessory buildings. This is pretty common for accessory buildings, except for agricultural use. Accessory buildings, not including barns and stables, shall be constructed of similar materials and colors and shall be architecturally designed to blend in with the primary building. 5, no mobile home, travel trailer, boat, or similar recreational vehicle shall be used as an accessory building. 6, no shipping container, cargo container, shipping crate, box trailer, or similar movable piece of equipment or object shall be used as an accessory building. 7, no utility connections or meters separate from the primary dwelling shall be allowed for accessory buildings. Notwithstanding this restriction, a separate sewer connection may be allowed to facilitate gravity flow subject to building official or designee approval. 8, no accessory building shall be rented, leased, or sold separately from the rental, lease, or sale of the primary building. 9, no accessory building shall be used as a permanent dwelling unit. 10, when compliant with the required setbacks, no detached garage shall be higher than 25 feet measured from finished grade to the highest point of its roof, or higher than the highest point of the roof of the primary dwelling, whichever is less. 11, accessory buildings located on corner lots shall meet the required corner side yard setbacks applicable to the zoning district in which the accessory building is located. Now 12 and 13, we've changed this language since we last discussed it to address 2 different building types. 12, the cumulative total square footage of an agricultural use accessory building shall not be greater than 25% of the overall lot area. So that that's an ag use building only. 13, the cumulative total square footage, all building floors included, of all detached garages and all other accessory buildings, including accessory dwelling units, ADUs above a detached garage, shall not exceed the footprint of the primary dwelling unit on the property. And so that's separating those two, because we hear about the ag uses and the provisions and the large buildings that can be put in place for an ag use, but we're concerned about the non-ag uses and the size and scale of some larger accessory buildings that have been appearing. Modifying regulations.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes.
Back on number 4 and number 6, a couple years ago on a league tour, it took us to a part of Salt Lake where they had modified shipping containers to be ADUs, which would definitely not match the architectural look of homes around here anyways. Or I've thought about like playhouses, a lot of times may not match. Would that be considered an accessory building?
A playhouse?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think generally, depending on the size, they would have to get a permit. And I've seen tree houses that people started to build and were excessive in size. What has been your experience, Cody?
No, the playhouses and smaller tool sheds fall into that exempt category, the 200 square feet or less. Typically, if you have a playhouse much larger than that, then yeah, you're probably borderline a casita or a guest home.
Okay. But back on it has to match or blend with the primary building. Are we potentially blocking other types of ADUs? Because I've even thought about that, because they can just drop it in your backyard, basically. One of those units that I saw, and
Yeah,
it was
and I don't know,
super nice, a ton of glass.
But a cargo unit, a cargo container that's been converted.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Something that I think we have to explore and maybe create a zone that allows those, because that's what other communities have done. They've allowed for those to go in certain zones or districts. I'm not sure that a cargo container that's been converted to a dwelling unit should necessarily be placed in someone's backyard. I mean, there might be an HOA and others that have something to say about that. It might concern some of the residents. I had a chance when I was working for Salt Lake County, a number of these were put up in the canyons without permits, and skiers and backcountry folks would come in and report those, and then UPD and code enforcement would go up and say, those have to be removed because we never issued any permits for such a dwelling unit, because they take the shipping container and convert it into a nightly rental, right, where people can snowshoe or cross-country ski in and out. I'm a little bit concerned about that. I mean, I've seen it in places, and you watch the TV shows on the different networks about the tiny houses. And I think those are neat, but I don't know that that's something, because they're not considered an ADU, because an ADU is put on a foundation. You know, they're going to pour a foundation and then build that ADU in the backyard. It's a separate structure. That's on a trailer. Most of them are on a trailer, and they can be taken from one place to another, or they're
portable.
movable, they're portable. And so that's a little bit different. I think that makes sense up in the mountains, you know, in a summer cabin area or another area. I'm just not sure if it's applicable to us at this point right now. I know a lot of cities are struggling with that and trying to figure out what to do, if that's needed or necessary. There could be some legislation that comes through that says we have to allow that. I had a chance to go to the National League of Cities and Towns conference, and I went on a mobile tour in the greater downtown Atlanta area. And the city, they're looking through their mayor to do 20,000 affordable units. But if you think about Atlanta Metro, how huge it is, and they bought some abandoned office buildings and towers and converted that to affordable housing units or apartments, 40 stories high. There's a situation where they bought a piece of property that used to be a parking structure for a federal building across the street. That building's going for a different use, but they've torn the structure down, and now they have this plan for the next 5 years. They're going to bring in a bunch of these portable shipping containers and use that as affordable housing. They're going to put those in there for a number of families or individuals to have a housing opportunity rather than being homeless or whatever the scenario is. And they're thinking that is a good scenario for 5 years, and then if the market changes, because it's commercial, we can take those containers out and build a new building. But that's a downtown metro area. So I just don't know with CCNRs and PDRs and folks and neighbors if the shipping container is just plugged in, if that's a good fit for a single family residential area. I think it's a little bit of a concern of ours, but the council may have other ideas there. But what do you think?
When Jim and I were talking about this, the language is already existing under the modifying regulations for carports. So I'm like, if we're going to force color and design, architectural design on a carport, why wouldn't we look at that for our accessory structures as well? So that's what kind of drove us to putting it in this section.
Gotcha.
We have that in the next section, the modifying regulations, where there's that criteria for the carports. So we do have folks that have called and said, hey, I just want to put a shipping container here. And at this point, we've said, no, that, that concerns us. Well, it's just temporary. How do we know that it's just temporary, and then how does it go away? We have seen some in some agricultural properties going up outside of town, heading on the west end of town on those properties across from the Fort property there. But I don't know. It's something we need to look at. I can see it coming in on an RA piece of property, perhaps, like a big piece of property, a 5 or 10 acre chunk, but I'm just not sure where, people are buying a building lot and building this home of their dreams, and then some shipping containers are put in. That's our concern at this point. But I think it's going to come back because, I see it in more agricultural areas. If you're driving, to Salt Lake, a couple hours up, maybe it's outside of Fillmore before. Have you noticed on the left-hand side, if you're driving north, have you seen that area of ag property, and there's all these tiny homes? There's like all these tiny homes, and they're not just single wide trailers. They're things that people have built, or maybe they're living off the grid. But it's truly agricultural land that they're living on, off the grid, out there. And so that's a little bit different, that situation. So
Gotcha. Okay.
I've seen some of that, and I do know Salt Lake City's looking at doing one as well. I don't know if it's like the one in Atlanta, Georgia that they spoke to us about, but Salt Lake City's looking at creating a tiny home, a park. I don't know if they call it a park, but a tiny home village that may have 50 to 100 units on it.
They just opened 50 this week.
That's it. Yeah.
If you'd like
So
to
that's
see
the
those.
first that I'm aware of. That's the first one, sheer size and trying to deal with problems. First one I know of in the state.
It's more of a homeless
Yes. And
opportunity.
that's what Atlanta's trying to do, because they're going to have bathrooms and other facilities that are shared between the units itself, because they can't do that for every unit.
Well, I know of a group that are buying small units and placing them in Texas.
Yeah.
And they've got 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, everything in a facility that is about 400 square feet. And if you wanted to see one, you could slip up to Beaver and I could show you one. Actually, they're not bad, but they're certainly not something that you wouldn't want to live in permanently, but if you didn't have a home, that might be something that would be.
Brock and I had a chance at the league conference to go where they have the demonstrations and some of the different things that you can walk and talk to people about their product. That's some really nice ones. They had one that was about 500 square feet, $490, and I thought, man, this would be great for a cabin lot somewhere. This is terrific for a weekend getaway, because it was really nicely done.
Well, and they're doing those kind of things. We're talking about affordability. That's about, other than getting free land, that's about the only way you're going to make them affordable. And actually, Ryan Anderson has a couple up in Beaver on. They bought out of China in a kit, assembled it. If you wanted to see them, they're right there. But
He flew with a shipping container underneath his helicopter, right?
they just dropped out of it.
Yeah. I think it's certainly something we can explore in the future, and there may be a need.
Well, these are certainly a lot nicer
Yeah.
looking than a cargo container.
Oh, yeah, yeah, and the ones we looked at were as well, and they're a little pricier than you think. I mean, they're quite nice, but some of them go for a couple $100 a foot, so. All right, so the modifying regulations is basically the same. Item B, and this is where we've talked about the setback. So it says private garages and accessory buildings located to the rear and at least 10 feet away from the main dwelling unit may be built 5 feet from the from the property line, provided that, and then you get into the different scenarios. That's current language. We haven't proposed to change that. That's some of what we're hearing that some in the community may want us to consider, and I'll go through that in a minute. But what we did here is added the exception about 2/3 down the way where it says exception. And then it says accessory buildings of less than 200 square feet may be built 3 feet from the property line if existing easements have been cleared by the building official or designee. Building height is limited to 10 feet when determining the fire separation for any non-accepted accessory building. An accessory building of less than 200 square feet on a neighboring property will be disregarded. And so this is something where Cody and Matt have helped me on the language on this one for the exception. Did you have anything you wanted to add on that language, Cody?
I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm happy to field any questions.
Okay. And then if we go to the next page, B, Brock might have just stepped out, but if we go to the next page, there's 2 items I need to bring up that we've discussed recently, maybe as recently as last week. So item B talks about the height of the carport awning shall not exceed the height of the top plate of the walls of the first floor of the dwelling, or a maximum of 10 feet above the normal grade of the side yard setback. So there's some discussion there as to whether or not we should increase that slightly to 12 feet or 15 feet. The big item, or the other item that's come up recently, and Cody can speak to this, is item B3. The side of the carport awning nearest the front street shall be set back a minimum of 10 feet behind the front face of the dwelling unit. We talked about this last week, and we thought maybe 5 feet would be ample. Cody's gone around because we have someone currently that has applied for a permit. They're looking to do this. Cody's had a chance to look around town to see if any of the carports are pushed back 10 feet or stepped back, and I'll let you speak to that. You haven't seen any or many that comply with this current ordinance.
No, and carports are something that residents oftentimes go to Costco and find one, and then it ends up being put together on a weekend, all Saturday, all of a sudden there's a carport. So many of them I don't think are permitted, and in my short time here, I'm finally dealing with the first resident that wants a carport. So I was just going through this ordinance, and that 10-foot setback, the increased setback, I'm like, man, that I understand that it's to soften it, possibly kind of tuck it behind the primary house, or the primary dwelling, but I'm not sure why we need 10 feet. So we briefly discussed it last week because, yeah, the application just came before us. So we'd like some input on that. And the height, I know carports are often put in place to protect RVs, boats, from of course, the UV and elements. So 10 feet doesn't always allow that, so I don't know if we'd consider allowing those to go a little higher.
And then the last item, if we scroll down one more page, is the scenario that Logan Blake presented to the Planning Commission on September 14th to the modifying regulations. So we've gone through modifying regulations already, but he wanted to discuss this language and see how the Planning Commission felt about it, and I'm presenting it to the council tonight. So item B talks about private garages and accessory buildings, again located to the rear, at least 10 feet away from the main dwelling, may be built 5 feet from the rear property line and 2 feet from the side property line. So he's saying 5 and 2. And then if you scroll down, items 2, 3, and 4 are the same. Then he's added item 5 here, which coincides with the figure or graphic here. It says no accessory building shall have a width greater than 1/2 the width of the rear property line as measured from the property line. So if you can see that down there, that would be pretty wide. This drawing doesn't show 1/2. And then no accessory building shall have a depth greater than 1/2 the depth of the side property line. And that would be pretty deep. This is more like 1/4 of a third or 1/3 of that depth or width shown on this drawing. And scroll down a little bit more. No more than one such accessory building shall be constructed on any given lot. So this is an issue that's come up with setback. And I'll let Cody discuss that, fire rating and separation and what would be required if we allow something like this to go through. Now I'm going to tell you what the Planning Commission thought. The other 4 members that were there that evening did not agree. They talked about scenarios, one of which Commissioner Mark Weston talked about what was located directly behind him, an accessory structure that's used as an ADU that's quite close. He gets to hear their laughter, the barbecue, all the conversations because it's so close to the rear yard, in his opinion. Curtis White had agreed with him. Mark Hendrickson agreed with that as well, and so did Shelley Harris. So the other 4 that were there that evening felt it should stay at the 5 feet, the 5 and 5. They did not like the 5 and 2. Just telling you the opinion of the other planning commissioners. They thought anything less than 5 was too close. There's a push out there by some that would like to go closer. And based on, things they've seen in St. George and other areas, we know St. George is dealing with infill, a lot of redevelopment in their downtown area where the lots are quite small. Similar to like you see in Sugar House and other areas up north where they've allowed these accessory structures quite close to the side yard. But you get into fire rating and everything else. And does the first guy get around that requirement? And then the neighbor comes in and they don't have 10 feet of separation, so he has to fire rate his wall. So there's a lot of things here that come into play. And, what's fair is fair for everyone, not just the first guy kind of maybe getting around that requirement and then the next person coming in and having to meet that requirement and put his further away and separate. So, Cody, what are your thoughts on this?
No, there was extensive discussions, Jim pointed out, but one thing that we did talk about is having consistency. It didn't make sense to have 2 feet and 5, 2 feet and 5 feet on the reduced setback. And then the other, the push for this was property rights. And so it was Commissioner Blake that had brought up the use of the property. My point was once you allow something closer than 5 feet, when the neighbor comes in, first of all, when you go closer than 5 feet, you have to fire rate that wall. Now, the neighbor, even at 5 feet, would have to fire rate because when you don't have that 10 feet of separation between the 2 accessory structures, then both of them have to be fire rated. So that was an item of not contention, but of discussion. Just to simply point out that now you're making possibly neighboring properties incur costs that they wouldn't anticipate or wouldn't normally have to do if you don't allow that setback of less than 5 feet. And I didn't understand, when you look at the diagram, the 5 feet in the rear, that if you take a standard city block, every house on a corner, their backyard abuts to a side yard, so it doesn't always give you that 10 feet. And I think that's what Commissioner Blake was trying to represent, is that from rear yard to rear yard, you would have 10 feet, but that's not always the case. Every corner lot, you're going to abut a side yard. So you're going to have something at 2 feet off a property line.
The other thought sorry, I don't think that's working. If you allow this scenario, maybe it's on the left-hand side, then the neighbor would do the same and so on. But what happens when the neighbor decides to flip the orientation of their home and flip the garage, and you don't have the 10 feet in between? Then he has to fire rate. That's the concern. So if we allow for something like this, We either keep it at 5 and 5, or if they want 2 feet, it's 2 and 2. I don't know if that makes sense, like we had talked about before, with one at 5 feet and one at 2 feet. The other option there.
Yeah, I would favor having the two reduced setbacks consistent.
Council?
Well, I certainly feel that the 5 feet is a minimum. I think it used to be in our rear yard setback that it was, as long as you were 10 feet away, you still had to have your rear setback at 10 feet. We may have changed that since then, but.
For a dwelling, the dwelling unit
But the
versus accessory.
the dwelling unit
Right,
has to have a 10-foot setback.
right.
And the accessory building had to be with the 10-foot setback away from the back, rear yard. And you had to have really a 10-foot distance between the accessory building if it was detached,
Okay.
between the accessory building and the existing building.
This is that knowledge that Brock referenced earlier with you. Because you're absolutely right. That's the way it currently reads. It allows for a reduced side setback, and I thought it was a mistake in that it was an oversight that the rear wasn't acknowledged. But I see the point that the reduced setback was allowed on the side and not the rear for that reason.
Right.
But again, in a city block, you still have 4 of those homes that you don't have the.
And I would say the 5 is a minimum on the side, but
Yeah.
I do know the rear was a 10-foot, and it basically was a fire issue too, because you need access to get back and into those. So the 5-yard setbacks are still, to me, pretty narrow to be able to get a vehicle back there. You know, if the chief needed to get something back to fight a fire on the exterior, in the rear area, if you've only got a 5-foot setback, and you've got a wall, and 5 feet on, you've got 10 feet, but you gotta knock down the wall to get back there to fight a fire. To me, it's, both of them are pretty hard to justify when it comes to safety issues.
Other comments, council?
I think it's concerning if a neighbor can build an ADU and then I have to incur a cost because of that. I mean, could we write it so that if they did build that, they would bear the burden of that cost if they, make it so their neighbor has to do that?
Now, for an ADU, correct me, isn't it 10
Yeah, an
feet?
ADU, you
Because
would
it's
comply
like-
with the setbacks for the zone. So we're just accessory structure, maybe that's what you were
Okay.
referencing.
On carports, I was trying to think of examples around where I live, and I thought of one in specific that's definitely not 10 feet back. I never thought it looked necessarily weird, but it was definitely a little bit different. So I think I would support the 5 feet. That seems really reasonable.
I think most of the ones on my street are even with the front of the house.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I thought. That's kind of what I envision a lot of times. It's exactly even.
Yeah, I don't know that I found one that they've complied with that setback requirement. Or the height, there's many of them that are over 10 feet high. Or it's the way the language is now is the top plate, which is your wall height, or 10 feet, whichever's less. So most of them throughout the heights would be restricted to 8 feet, because that's the plate line is 8 feet.
Well, and we're talking about a portable, all your carports that are actually on the buildings are with the face right with the wall. So, I mean, if I'm driving down the street and I see a carport on a house, it's also, the beginning is at the face of the front wall.
Most of the trusses go
They're not
right
set
across the
back.
top of it.
Yeah.
That's true. If you look at the duplex that was just built on Chapel Street across from the post office, those 2 carports come right out to the plane of the primary structure.
I think the thought process, and I've seen this in other communities, to stagger it, push it back a little bit, it doesn't become the focal point like the front of the home. Because in a lot of communities, they require that you store your boat or RV or whatever behind a fence that would be in the side of your garage between that and the property line, so you can push it back a little bit to not get that clear view. And then how high do you want to go? Is 15 feet, I'm not sure that we wanted it, the height of some of these garages that have been built really high, like the Ford car, or the RV. Just a thought. Maybe it's 12, maybe it's 15, but I don't think we would want to allow 20 feet for something.
I just know every one of these requirements that looks really good adds to the cost of that house. And we've got hundreds that don't comply with it already in the city. So why do we want to add more requirements to increase the cost of housing?
Well,
When we've already
right,
accepted the
it's in our
alternative.
code, and I don't know why, it's in our code.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
hasn't
we
been
basically, I don't know how many complaints you've got about the carport being flush with the front of the house. I've never had one.
Well, you haven't had one, I believe, because I don't know how many have been permitted.
When you
Yeah.
permitted the house, most of the truss one, most of the ones
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
familiar
yeah.
with, the trusses go right across the front. That was part of the permit.
Right. With new construction, which carport to garage, probably very few of those, but I see your point.
And then they come back in and enclose it, put a garage door on it, and maybe put a temporary tack on the outside. And that's been acceptable to the community for as long as I've been around.
Now, looking at B, it says the carport awning. Is that a combination? I mean, if you eliminated the carport and just put an awning, shall always be well-maintained, shall be repainted, and all that, but the distance, I think if you include carport and awning, you've got to me, there's a different connotation, because I know of lots of homes that were built with carports, and we've allowed them to be, like Mayor said, right out even with the house. The trussing, when I built my first home on Santa Clara Drive, I had a carport, and we trussed it all, and then it's been enclosed since then, and it's even with the front of the house. So I'm not
So-
sure about this.
Would we strike item 3? We
I-
could, yeah.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think this pertains to the lean-to. I don't know that this section this is an accessory use to the primary.
Well,
That's what we're dealing with, not a primary aspect of a
Well,
home.
I don't know, Matt, what would be a term that would make it is it a carport awning and you don't have that hyphenated or something, and then you know that it's an awning that we're talking about? Not of course, where you leave it as part of the building when it was first built, I guess that doesn't, yeah.
Well, this section allows it to go within 2 feet of the property, so it's definitely an accessory use. The carport attached to the home would have to comply to the setbacks for the primary, or for the zone of the primary structure. So everything, I mean, I think that's where we're losing clarity, is that we're not looking at this as an accessory. We may need to just clarify that.
I think you need to, clarify the language, because something we've allowed historically without complaint, I don't want to add cost to new construction.
So is the goal here, like those aluminum things you buy, you want those set back from the front of the house? Is that the real goal of this, or is it something else?
You'd have to ask the fine folks before us that requested 10 feet.
Okay.
We're just trying to soften it to 5, and if you want to soften it to 0, that's fine too.
Because even when I've thought about putting something on the side of my house, I always figured, it can be level with my house. I'm not going to bump it out. But I never thought I'd have to push it back 10 feet.
Well, some of the ones you talk about, Lowe's and Home Depot, aren't they just a galvanized metal?
Yeah.
They haven't been painted to match the home. I think that's the big thing. If it matches the home, it's not as big of a deal.
Well, I just don't see that there's a reason. If I drive by the home, yes, from the side coming down, I may not see it, but when I'm in front of that house, I'm still going to see the carport.
So maybe we're talking about just striking language from the code rather than even softening it. I don't know.
If we're not we haven't enforced it for 50 years, why do we want to start enforcing it?
What are your thoughts? I mean, we can strike, I mean, if there's confusion here, we can remove some of it.
Well, I think we still have to police the awning, but I don't know the language, whatever you're going to do with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that part.
I think in my experience, it's when they didn't fall into the carport section of the ordinance. Well, boy, I fit into the awning. I'm just going to call this an awning, and then I'm going to store my car under it. And so I think that's probably why it's carport/awning.
I would say reword it, bring it back, or strike it and bring it back.
How do you feel about the height?
Well, I don't think you, in my mind, I don't think you provide the awning for an RV that's 20 feet high, you know. But I also think that sometimes if we don't match the height of the home, it looks as screwy as it does if you're building that. But that's, again, this is all preference, taste, and I don't know if I want to impose my taste on somebody else.
Well, that's the other thing I noticed as I drove around looking to see if we had that 10-foot setback was many of them exceed the 10 feet in height. So I didn't know if we wanted to allow for a 12 or a clear, I guess you need a clear opening of 12 or 13 feet to get a RV under there, so.
Again, if we haven't enforced it for 50 years, why are we going to start now?
Because it's written, Mr. Mayor.
Because it's in the
Pull it
code.
out. If we've got a bad law, change it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're here to get the direction on, because it's in the code, so we either get rid of it or we change it. So,
Yeah, ironically, there's more language for carports than there is for accessory buildings.
Let's see.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
We'll be
guys.
back.
This will be back.
Yeah.
The way things are going in the governor's office, all this stuff's going to be moot in a year or two anyway.
Let's see, where's Santa Clara Parkway?
Cities won't have the ability to do any of this.
Right here.
Okay, staff reports, Ryan?
See, that was my carport.
Oh, we'll start off the Canyon View parking lot. So we met with the contractors up there yesterday. Tomorrow, they're gonna pave the north section in the park. And they started last week doing all the concrete curbing and concrete flat work in the south portion, and they're rocking and rolling. They're hoping to have that done next week. And they'll still have some more dirt work. He couldn't really give me a timeline on paving that because it's all dependent on temperature. It has to be 51 degrees and climbing, and we get a cold spell that could push that back. But we're getting there. They are moving it, so they're doing a great job.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I had to go back and look at the plans we approved for the north part. What's happening with the little loop around the trees?
That's just going to be foot traffic only.
Are we gonna like fill it in with landscaping or grass or extend the trees or just leave it? What do you think?
That's up to, you mean where the road was? Yeah, we'll probably have to do some, again, and also where it goes in the front by the volleyball courts also, because that's in the future going to be where the trail goes. We didn't have the money to do that right now. So that's something we'll have to look at, doing something temporarily too. So, but yeah, we can put some landscaping in there or some benches or something. Definitely don't want to leave it just a road. People think, oh, I need to
Yeah,
go
like
drive on
jump the
that.
curb and
Yeah.
drive on it or something, yeah.
Yeah. Crew is enjoying their break from tournaments, getting caught up on some stuff they got behind on and trying to keep up with the leaves. And they will be spending a significant amount of time at the cemetery this winter. I don't know if you've driven through the cemetery, mostly the middle grass section. If you look down those headstone rows, instead of going like this, they kind of go like this. So it's been bothering me for 7 years, and I've never gotten the okay to move them, but we're going to move them. We're going to put them where they're supposed to be. So it won't be spend 2 weeks up there just kind of when they've got time, maybe do a few here and there, but we're hoping to get at least the majority of them this winter. Some of them won't be able to move if the concrete base is cracked. It's the same thing when we're doing a burial. If the headstone, obvious, we try to move it, it's gonna break or fall apart, we leave it. And if it has to be moved, we'll have Kenworthy. In fact, Robert Kenworthy, when he was out with the vaults, we were talking about that, and he said, if you need us to help you, let us know. We'll come out there with our hoist and we'll help you. So hopefully we'll get it all done, if not at least most of it done this winter, and kind of go from there. But they got the entranceway painted a couple of weeks ago. Looks great. So the next thing, and that'll be on the budget year for next year, is replacing the wrought iron fence on that north end. Other than that, guys are doing good. Got a lot of people off for the holidays that are from out of town, and that's about it. You have any questions?
Any updates on the orchard group getting together?
Well, I guess that depends on who the orchard group is.
Okay.
I know we talked about having meetings, maybe you and Ben and myself, but whenever you want to meet, I'm available. We can meet.
So do you want me to call that meeting, or do you want to, or?
We will.
We will.
Okay, that'd probably be preferable.
Okay.
Sometime in the new year, obviously, but
Yeah.
we could just get together, and I just worry we're gonna be upsetting people eventually if we don't get something going there.
Well, we need at least to make a decision on exactly what we're going to do.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah, and budget for, need a budget for that, but, yeah, and that, as Ryan said, there's the picture that down there, but that's, pretty expensive.
Conceptual, right, yeah.
Conceptual, exactly. So.
Okay, Gary?
I'll just give you a quick update on the generators. Unit 1, I believe I can't remember if I've briefed you on that yet or not, about that we dropped a valve, one of the valves. Okay. So there's quite extensive damage. It did damage one of the turbos on that same side, so we haven't received an estimate yet on the cost to repair engine number 1. They did some bore scoping on all the cylinders just to check, and they found some scarring on the cylinder walls, so we're going to have to probably do a total rebuild on the cylinder walls on engine number 1. Some of that was not due to the valve that failed. It was carbon buildup on top of the piston that was scratching the cylinder walls. So we're looking at, they decided they better look at engine number 2 to see if it has the same scarring. And they've bore scoped it, and it looks pretty good. So it looks like unit number 2 is fine. So I'll bring that cost estimate to you to repair engine number 1. It'll be kind of expensive. Units 3 and 4 have been running. We've ran them over this weekend. Gas prices have dropped a bit, so we're able to just generate and save some money from going on the market. We're only going on the market about 1.4 megawatts, so it's not too bad, and prices haven't been too bad on the market anyway. So, but we're still running them when we need to, and when it's economical to do it. We still have an open position for a lineman on our crew. We're having a tough time filling that position, and I guess nobody's looking for work right now, or happy where they're at. The crew's been doing a great job, being short-handed, and they just finished up the last connections on Vineyard Drive. They were waiting for some of the sidewalk to get done to go in and pull some poles out and get that. So that's all finished, and they finished up Victor Street. They were removing some overhead lines and moving them underground on Victor Street at the request of Dan Fry. So that's done. One thing we talked about over the last few months with the power cost adjustment was having UFS do an updated financial projection and rate design. I've got an estimate from them for $11,500 to do that estimate, so we're going to go ahead with that. We talked about it at length at different times, to have UFS kind of look at and see where we're at. And they'll also look at the PCA. Let's see. an update on the CFPP project. Of course, it's done. They've kind of come up with some figures that's an estimated final exposure for Santa Clara. There's a lot of costs that are still going to be coming in with trying to wrap up the project. Financial costs, legal fees, all that kind of adds up. The amount there is $225,000 is what we're going to be liable for. And that we can cover with our reserve that we have at UAMPS. Any questions on that before I move on?
So we're not getting any money back, we actually have to pay money?
We got some back, but it wasn't enough to cover all the costs that's still incurred.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to believe that we, spent that much money for pretty much nothing. I mean, it was that the opportunity was there, but that's just, it's heart-wrenching to think that we didn't get anything out of that. But I guess that's the risk you take on a project that size and new technology. Get my glasses on. UAMPS they mentioned in our last meeting that they're going to be changing their policy a little bit, their purchasing strategy. I think they're going to try to start buying like 115% of all the members' loads, so we're not going into the market as much. That's something they've been studying and looking at lately, because the market's so volatile. They just think they're going to start buying more resource and cover 115% of our load. There's still times that we may go over, but if they do that, then I think we'll be a lot better off than going into the market. There's another study project coming online. It's called Fremont Solar with battery backup. I put in that we want 3 megawatts of interest into that project, so hopefully that one will come about. Steel Solar was supposed to be online September and October, the 2 different phases. They have not been online yet. There's still issues with getting the solar panels, and it's been delayed. They have paid UAMP some delay damages of $316,000, and I'm not for sure the date, but if they do not have a commercial operation date by February 24th, they could be allocated another $226,000. So that will come into our percentage. We'll get some of that. But they're supposed to be, the commercial operation date is February 24th now for 1A, and 1B is March of 24. That's about it.
Thanks, Gary. Any questions for Gary?
Did you see the person on, I think, Instagram that reached out about a lineman position?
No, I don't have an Instagram account. I haven't heard anything from...
I think it was just sent to the general cities. No, it was in Messenger, it looks like.
Courtney usually, she's been out all week with being ill, so she's usually the one that kind of monitors that, I think, for
It was
us all.
2 weeks ago.
Oh,
So
I haven't seen
anyways,
it.
I'll show it to you after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, anything else tonight?
Which is from Lance's side of thing, but a text for info. I'm sure Brock will mention that, but kind of a neat option for information for fire, I think, is up and running. And then I told you about the medic engine status. January 11th, we'll start that. We'll have a medic at both stations running all the time, and the engines will be certified as paramedics. So that's a neat thing. We have 4 paramedic graduates. We'll probably bring them back for recognition in January. You can meet them and give them a little award. So that's a year-long process, and we're proud of them. We're looking at the it's called CAS, like an ambulance accreditation. So we'll start that process this year. It's something a lot of the private ambulance companies go through the process of accreditation.
they did an article in the St. George News a while back about it, so about Gold Cross, but we should definitely get that done. And I think that's pretty much it. I mentioned the arson program. If you guys have spoken with Brock about it, I'm not sure, but that's an interesting development. We'll see where that goes. The first half of the year, we have a person that's post-certified, and, you know, she can carry a weapon and work as a special function officer. So more to come on that. That'll probably be a kind of a year-long process to get things going with that. But and then the first quarter, I'd like to come back with you all, work with Brock, but for the long title, but it's Public Safety Impact Fee Facilities Plan and Impact Fee Analysis that Sunrise Engineering did. Bringing that back. Talked to Dell too. He's on board with. They wanted to redo theirs and just make sure we're going where we want to go with station and resources and rates and stuff. And you know, if we need to change things or increase our impact fees or go a different direction. So that's all I had. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Code?
Real brief, just to recap on our building permits, we're at between what we've issued and what's pending, we're right around 50 permits for the year, fiscal year. We have 13 additional awnings, TIs, pools, things of that nature in the review process. Overall, we have 379 permits that are active, so we're doing well. Building maintenance, you can see in this room that the electricians have got through here and installed the LED lights. They've made it through the majority of the building, and they've started working on the parking lot lights and the exterior lights on the building. So things are looking up and a lot brighter around here. So I don't know if you've noticed that, but we can actually see each other across the room. The only other thing I have is Mr. Drake. It's been an honor. I've only been here a short period of time, but I appreciated the guidance that you've given me when I went to you. Your door's always been open, and I appreciate that. Always a strong level of common sense, and yeah, I'm going to miss you. So thank you.
Thanks, Cody.
Jim?
Thanks. Just briefly, Mayor. Our Historic District Committee's been meeting. They've been pretty active this month, the month of December. We had a kickoff meeting on December 5th here in the city offices. Last week we had 2 field trips or tours of the Historic District where we walked with maps and looked at the Historic District and, you know, what they felt as far as the construction, which buildings were, you know, of value versus others that, you know, may be in need of repair. It's kind of neat how many granaries we have and some of the neat architectural styles and function of the buildings. Kim Campbell, our architect or consultant, was able to come to one of those, but not both, but I believe it was time well spent. We had a second meeting last night. We've been tasked with a bunch of assignments by our chair, Mimi McKenna, and I'll be meeting with her next week to go over some other items. But it's, you know, we're moving full speed, taking a little break here for the holidays, but our next meeting is January 2nd. We will not have Planning Commission next week on the 28th. We did have a Planning Commission last week. We talked about our annexation policy plan as required by state code to have one and an associated annexation map and expansion area. More to come on that soon, but that's the direction we're heading in, and those are the items I have, and I want Denny and Lena, who's not here, to let both of you know that I've enjoyed working with you. I'll miss both of you. Thank you for your time and your commitment to the city. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
I have one thing for Jim. So I had a council member from another city ask to get one of our staff reports for a development. And I think, Jim, you do most of that work, right? And get the feedback from all the different departments. And
Sure.
he was very impressed with it and hoped that his city could follow that lead. So.
Oh, nice.
You're
Is
doing
it a city here locally or somewhere?
Yeah. So
Okay.
you're just doing an awesome job with that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That's taken years to develop. I appreciate that.
Rob?
And I'll just quickly piggyback to Jim's comment on the annexation. You guys probably saw an email today. It'll come to you guys for discussion, but you know, anywho, it's a policy, it's a map, don't worry, not a big deal. GIS, Christelle's been working hard on GIS and getting us with Sunrise and some of the issues that ArcGIS and some of the things they're doing there, developing, getting our own account, things that way, and then working with staff to create mobile collectors. So people out in the field, they can make some, collect the data, make some edits in there, and so we're gonna try to get our GIS up on par and more accurate how it is. And there's some discussion of even in next year's budget, maybe getting a GNSS or whatever that somebody can take around and actually get pinpoint. Right now, the GIS would be, I mean, it's 15, 30 feet off. I mean, you could go out there and you're not exactly accurate. We're going to try to get it more accurate. How Biden is the easy part. It's in having the time or personnel to go out and sit and do that. So that'll come in the budget retreat and how we're going to try to do that. Other things, the court recertification, we talked about, that's in process. It's with the state. We haven't heard anything back. I spoke with Tia Benson, court clerk, today, and she said they haven't heard anything back, so she assumes not hearing anything is good news. So, but as I mentioned, court's going back to in-person in January. Some good with that. But I said it creates the challenge of having a bailiff, but I think we can maybe help police out. They help us out with, you know, getting another officer. The numbers that Chief has sent off, I think for the next 6 months, roughly would cost us about $20,000 would be our expense to finish up this fiscal year. So, Chief Parker did mention about the text. There's a software called TextMyGov that you can use, and it's information you text to the city a number, and you ask questions and you get responses. We have, working with Lance, he's done this in-house with some other, instead of buying the software, just been able to develop it. And so there's a phone number. If you want to try it out, give it a try. It'll give you a response. If we don't have it in the database right now, it'll give you that. But any questions you have, we're trying to just build our database. My brother-in-law works for Crowley, Texas. They use TextMyGov. We had some conversations with him trying to get, hey, what are some of your questions you have? So we were trying to build that database. But the number is 435-334-6712. So kind of like our normal 6712 at the end, but just 334. But there's some in there. We're trying to, I mean, we've told everybody just text it questions. Most of it is not in there, but just anything you can think of that, hey, maybe somebody would want. And hopefully in that somebody could text it and say, hey, how do I sign up for utilities? And they get that. You know, when the city council agendas, where can I find them? Gives that information. Fire's got it to where if somebody want to know, hey, I heard a siren, what's going on? Theirs is type in siren, and it'll give them a link. They can go and see what the active calls are going on and things. So we're trying to get information. People can maybe use it, be texting, and find out information. So if you come up with information, text that number. Lance is hard at work at monitoring that and trying to build that database. So we have LPC on January 8th. The next LPC, that'll be the last one before the session. We also have Local Officials Day the following week on the 16th and 17th. Their youth are going up on Tuesday, getting a tour of the Capitol, I believe, with Representative Walters, and then the actual day is the 17th. We have the Economic Summit on January 11th. Some of you said you were wanting to attend. I registered those who had reached out to me on that. So special meeting on January 2nd for the election swearing in of council. Ivans City has, on our combined meeting, has recommended January 25th for that meeting. Does anybody have any? Krista and Jarrett, Mayor, January 25th. And then following that, our budget meeting, we're looking at the following week. That first week is what I'm looking at, budget for February 7th or 8th, whether you want to do a Wednesday, Thursday. We can push back to the 15th if need that. Those first 2 weeks of February, Debbie will be here. So the first week kind of looked at because we don't have a meeting, but it does mean there'd be 4 weeks running in a row of meetings. But so maybe, do you guys have a preference between a Wednesday, Thursday?
The 7th would work better than the 8th for me, but I
Okay.
can make both work.
Okay, 7th. Well, that works right now. We'll look at the February 7th then. Other thing to bring up, National League of Cities, and part of their things, they have a congressional summit that is held in DC. If it's March 10th through the 13th, if you'd like to attend that, to go out there during that time. And Cameron Deal from the league says usually from Utah they have about 80 representatives are out there during the congressional summit. So if you're interested in attending that, let me know. We can get you registered and that done. Lance will be attending that here. I believe Sean Guzman attends that, and there's it sounds like from Cameron a pretty good contingency that goes out there to on the federal level advocacy. So
What time's the flight?
whatever time you want.
It's a red eye.
So, other than that, I'll let you know I'll be out of the office next week and the following week. I will be here on the 2nd for the swearing in, but I'll be out of the office. So, that's all I have.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Brock. I already talked to Jared. I go in for surgery on the 3rd, and I'll probably be out of commission for a couple of weeks, so I'm not planning on being here on the 10th. We'll see on the 17th.
Okay.
So I won't be here for mayor's report, but probably the biggest thing is that the governor's putting the hammer down on affordable housing. We had a 5-county mayors association meeting, and the league talked about some of the initiatives that he's pushing. One involving modular housing, where it's going to have to be allowed in any zone. The first time initiative, this is if you have a moderate income housing plan like Santa Clara, the city's going to be required to zone areas for first time home buyers. There'll be requirements on density minimums and square footage maximums and AMI requirements and owner occupied requirements and deed restrictions to keep it affordable long term, but every city's going to have to establish these first home initiative zones in the city. We'll see what the legislature does with it, but know that it's coming. I imagine it'll be discussed in LPC.
Sure.
He's making a big push on housing affordability issue, preventing investors from purchasing housing or conversion to short-term rentals. These are going to be owner-occupied type small homes. And there'll be a hammer attached to it. That basically, if you don't incorporate it and administer it, then they'll take that ability away from you. The land use authority will go away from the local government. It'll be state-controlled zoning. So it's going to be a fun year.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's pretty much, the other things don't really impact us with airport land use and some other stuff. The MPO did approve $500,000 in 2027 to start the formal alignment studies and EA on the western corridor. At least phase 1 of it that connects Gap Canyon Parkway to Old 91, so the part that's through Santa Clara City. So we're still 3 years away from it, but there is funds in there, and there's a chance they could get moved up if another project falters. Again, thanks everybody for you guys did a great job up there on Saturday. It was It was a good time. It was a special time, so I appreciate it. And we got to have some comments on the Northern Corridor, the supplemental EIS that the BLM has opened up, so I'll put those together and send them in next week. But if there's nothing else, thanks again, Danny. It's been real.
Thank you, man.
And everybody have a very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we are adjourned.
Jared, enjoyed this.
For sure. Thank you so much. Brock,
Yes.
website
Yes.
question.
One other thing, I'd like to wait and talk about the new council assignments till the 24th, till I'm back.
Okay.
So, just so you know,
Are there assignments that need to be filled?
there
in the
will be,
meantime?
I mean, we may miss a solid waste meeting.
Yeah,
when
solid
we
waste
meet.
meeting will be the second.
I did have it on the agenda for the 10th to appoint somebody to the solid waste, but we can push
I
that.
think we can probably still do that one. I know who I want to have on that one.
Okay.
Dave Pond is the name that I've been toying about to take Denny's spot on that one.
Okay.
So maybe you guys can do ahead and do that one, and then we'll do the rest of it.